We good?
Oh, cripes.
I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock and just welcome everybody. Kim is going to be joining us, or sorry, Miss Savory is going to be joining us over Zoom. She should be in a little bit, but she's self-quarantining, so she's unable to join us today. But if everyone will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wonderful. All right. So we have a 22 people in our public comment list. So without objection, I'd like, if no one has objection, I would like to move our student representatives from Plymouth North to give their presentation ahead of that, if nobody has any. Oh, she's not on yet? Yeah, I don't see her. Oh, no. All right, then we can go. Nope, that's fine, that's fine. All right, well, maybe we can, if she joins and we're still going on for a little while, I don't know if we can go back and forth, but I know she probably has school.
We're not doing it?
We're not, now we're gonna,
Mrs. Burgess.
she's not on yet, so we'll just try to accommodate her as best as we can.
Your double mask is presenting the hearing.
Excuse me?
Yeah, that's all right, but she's not here to speak on it.
Oh, okay, so she's not here to speak about it. But she will be here. Well, we'll just do public comment and, we'll figure it out as we go. So, all right, well, I'm gonna open it up to our first person in public comment that I have is Jen White. If you'll say your name and where you live, that would be really great. And keep it down to about 2 to 3 minutes, as we have, like I mentioned, about 22 other people. And we're really grateful for having everybody who is so willing to speak about your topics and what you're passionate about. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Jen White. I have 4 children. 3 of my children are currently in the Plymouth schools. My daughter graduated from Plymouth North last year. I'm here tonight in support of Plymouth's close to 1,000 vocal music students who have been unable to sing together for so long now. I've had the privilege of attending many of their shows in the past, from the Greatest Showman chorus concert put on by Mrs. Fonseca, to students flying in Peter Pan under the direction of Mrs. Fuller, and to inspiring a cappella concerts put on by Mr. Grossman. I'm not alone in my love for these performances. I've recently been in contact with over 80 vocal music loving families across the district, and I know there are far more than that. We're asking you, coming to you as a group, asking for your support. We feel it's critical that the Plymouth School Committee votes to approve the letter to DESE, asking them to review their current vocal music restrictions. Rhode Island, Maine, Vermont, and Connecticut have recently revised their policies to allow safe indoor singing. For months, our singers across the district have been watching their peers play sports and their band instruments, all with modifications provided by DESE. Tonight, we as a parent group come to you feeling confident that we will have your support, as Plymouth has always been such a shining example of what a vocal music program should look like. Sandwich, Foxborough, Duxbury, and Hanover have already appealed to the state on behalf of their singers. We are asking that Plymouth join this pursuit, and hopefully we will have strength in numbers and we can get our kids back singing together soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I neglected to mention that we're going to cover each of these, answer your questions and address any concerns that people have when we get to the certain topics within our agenda, because we have a large number of people. So we'll move on to our next public comment is John Nelson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Nelson from Nautical Way. I have 2 elementary students. One is 6 and one is 8 years old. I'm not here for what Jen White had just brought up, but I just want to say I fully support her as well. So let's get the kids back into some normalcy and singing as well. So good stuff, Jen. In terms of why I'm here, on March 13th, 2020, our kids were sent out of school because of COVID, and I think at that point for the right reasons. Today, it's March 1st, 2021. Our kids are still out of school, and it's unacceptable at this point. Here we sit with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education saying that it's safe for all kids to return to school, or all elementary students to return to school. In addition, the CDC says that kids can go back to school. Let's remind you that the CDC is the same entity that is now recommending we wear 2 masks when we go out in public, not just one. So I would say their views are not very aggressive. They're probably extremely conservative, and they're saying our kids are safe in school. Randy Weingarten, leader of the second largest teachers union in the whole country, almost 2 million members, says that kids and teachers should be back in school. Not to mention Governor Baker and the President of the United States. So again, let's just quickly recap that. Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the CDC, head of the second largest teachers union in the country, the governor, as well as the president, say it's safe for our kids to be back at school. I see a couple of folks on the list who are going to argue against kids going back to school sooner rather than later, and I'd love to hear the facts that they can present, or the witnesses or the experts that say it's unsafe for our students and teachers, because the list I just read off is a pretty remarkable one. So April 26th, we've decided the kids can go back to school. That's more than 2 months away. Just some simple mathematics. My son still struggles with that math because he hasn't been in school very much, but 2 months away. And it's not even a definite date. Our school committee has not stood up and said this is going to happen. Every day our kids are left out, they fall further and further behind all the private schools, all the other states, and all the other towns that have decided to go back to school full time. It's time to bring our kids back to school full time. For those parents, for whatever reason, aren't comfortable with children going back to school, there'll still be remote academy. I think the school committee committed to that not too long ago. So there will still be an option for those who remain concerned for whatever reasons they have, whether they're high risk or whatever. So I just want to be clear here. The way I see it, based on everybody that has come out and supported kids going back to school, including the number of parents in the Plymouth area, the only roadblock now is the school committee. So I'm asking you one last time, please bring our kids back to school early, bring them back now, and get them the education they deserve. That's all I had to say today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, our next speaker is Lena Spakic. Sorry for botching your name. No, she's not there. Okay, and then we'll move. We have, look up here. Do we have J.R. Frye? Perfect. Oh, okay, hold on. Nope. You bring her in, okay. All right, and we have J.R. Frye on now, while she gets kind of acclimated. I feel bad. And let's go with J.R. Frye while we're waiting for Lena to come on in.
He's not in yet.
He's not either. Who we got? Anybody here?
Lena is in there.
Excuse me?
Miss Badger, Lena is in there. She's showing up on my screen. For some reason, you're not seeing everyone up here.
Oh, weird. Okay.
But she is in there, so if you want to address her.
Oh, yes. All right. So the next person to speak is Lena Spakic. Sorry. Please. We're sure she's in.
I can see her on my screen.
Okay.
But if they speak, they should leave.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi,
there you
I've just
are.
been sitting here waiting, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on.
Sorry, so we have started public comment, and unfortunately, we're in the waiting room. We're sorry about that. And it is your turn to speak. If you will just say your name and your address in Plymouth.
Guys, hold on. I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Guys, I gotta go in the other room, okay? Okay, I'm gonna go in here. All right, sorry. So my name is Lana Spaich, and what else am I supposed to say? Sorry.
Your street address.
I live on Jordan Road in Plymouth.
Thank you. And then whatever comments you'd like to share with us, we're trying to keep them to under 3 minutes since we have 22 public commenters.
Okay, so I wanted to comment on school reopenings. I'm hoping and pushing for an earlier full-time or 4-day reopening for elementary school kids, mainly because of the fact that I feel like both of my children are falling behind in elementary school with the remote learning, and also for their psychological well-being and, you know, putting them back into the community with other kids. So that's really all I had to say.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your opinion with us. All right, our next.
You're welcome.
Is J.R. Frye. Frye.
I should be used to that by now.
There we
Good evening. J.R. Frye, 40 Pine Hills Drive, apartment 1439. I also am strongly interested in having our kids return to school full time. It's been a real struggle watching my daughters at home and the difficulty that they have had knowing that the resources should be available to them in order for them to continue their learning. We know that several other towns and cities around the Commonwealth are moving towards full-time school. Brookline has an excellent document posted that extensively quotes from the CDC's most recent update that the conclusion is COVID-19 transmission in schools is associated with community transmission. Transmission spread within schools can be limited with strict implementation of layered mitigation strategies. When community rates of COVID-19 are high, there is, of course, an increased likelihood that SARS-CoV-2 will be introduced to and potentially transmitted within a school setting. Evidence to date suggests that when schools implement mitigation strategies with fidelity, transmission within schools can be limited. Our schools have a charge, and that charge is to educate our children. I applaud what our teachers have done so far to the best of their ability within this environment, but this environment is not conducive to the type of education that we expect and that we deserve and that our children deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the next person is Rebecca Cardillo. She's on. Wonderful.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Cardillo and I live on East Bay Lane. First of all, I would like to thank you all for your hard work supporting our school community. My son is a student at Nathaniel Morton Elementary School, which is a wonderful school with top-notch administrators and teachers. My son's current teacher, Mrs. Tattersall, is one of the best teachers I have ever seen. It is a tough time to be an educator, and I believe every teacher is doing the best job to provide a quality education for our students, while many teachers are struggling to manage remote learning for their own children. However, Plymouth's current hybrid system is not enough for many students who are falling behind academically, socially, and emotionally. My son is struggling, and I can see that many of his peers are as well. I am a full-time working parent, and I am struggling too. If we wait until the end of April to return children to school full-time, they will have been without a full-time education for over a year. Please consider reopening schools as surrounding cities and towns have done. According to CDC guidelines, it is safe to reopen. Some schools in Rhode Island and other surrounding states have been open since the fall without issue. Local private schools have been open full-time as well. We have plenty of data showing that it is safe for our children to be in school full-time. Please consider the well-being of our students and offer full-time in-person learning to the children who really need it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our next public comment is Phil Chandler. I don't see him.
Hello.
Oh, wonderful.
Hi. My name is Phil Chandler, and I'm calling in. I've had 3 kids in Nathaniel Morton, and again, I echo the other sentiments. I think that the administration, the teachers have been wonderful. I've volunteered there for 5 years, starting with my son when he went there in kindergarten. As a matter of fact, I went there myself. So I have nothing or only great things to say about the school, but my concern is, ever since I've been in there helping out with the kids, we're teaching these kids to be problem solvers. We're teaching them to be decision makers. We're teaching them to use their imagination. I don't need to tell you tonight what others will keep telling you is that, quoting other places that have opened, other states, other municipalities in Massachusetts. I think that we know that, and I think that you know that. And I'm not quite sure whose job it is to put, back to school first and actually figuring out how to solve that problem as opposed to delaying. So anyhow, I think that if that's what we're trying to get out of our children is to be problem solvers and use their imagination to do that, I would hope that that's what we can accomplish as well. And I would like a bit more transparency as far as what's going on. Not exactly sure where to look for that information because you get a lot, as you can imagine, through the town or different channels. But I would hope that this is a non-political type of problem that we are trying to solve. And again, I would hope that we could put the voters first and the children first. And even if it took a survey to try and get that pressure where it needs to be, that would be great. And again, as a father of 3 kids that are there, I'm at hockey practice right now with one of my kids, and it's just it's difficult juggling all of that, including teaching as well. So thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll solve this problem.
Thank you so much. All right. And now Terry Morse. No. Okay. Kelly Raymond. No. Danielle Negrelli. Oh, we just got more people. All right. Laurie Moore. Yeah. Oh, perfect.
Hi there.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Excellent. My name is Laurie Moore. I live at 6 Overlook Terrace in Plymouth. My husband Joel and I have been residents of Plymouth for over 20 years. We have 4 daughters who have gone through the Plymouth public school system. 2 graduated from Plymouth North and 2 are currently juniors. I was a classroom teacher for 8 years and a member of the MTA. I served as a parent representative on both the Nathaniel Morton and the PCIS school councils. I am speaking to you tonight because our family and many others are struggling. I think we can all agree hybrid learning is not ideal. For our family, it has been horrible. There are 187 names scrolling on the screen below me. These names represent 187 Plymouth families who support a full return to in-person learning as soon as possible. April 26th may very well end up being as soon as possible, but if numbers continue to trend downward at the rate they have been, we may find a March return is absolutely possible, but it is not going to be possible without a solid plan in place. The SAFE criteria have not been clearly articulated by this committee or by Dr. Campbell. In his letter dated February 8th, Dr. Campbell states 4 conditions will be examined during the April 6th school committee meeting, and a decision will be made then regarding a full return on April 26th. With all due respect, this is not a plan for a safe return. It's merely a list of conditions that will be examined and voted on at the April 6th meeting. In order to get our schools back as soon as safely possible, those 4 conditions need to be examined and clearly outlined now. So when they are met, we're not wasting time examining conditions. According to the letter, the 4 conditions that will be examined are vaccination distribution to K-12 educators. What does this mean? Are we stating all educators need to be vaccinated, a certain percentage? I know there are a lot of towns that have returned without vaccinations. 2, COVID test positivity rate. What number are we looking for? If the downward trend continues, we are very likely to be in a good spot by mid to late March. Transportation, with the restrictions lifted recently, it doesn't appear this condition should pose any more issues. I'm not sure. And 4th, the ability to use outdoor space for instruction. Sorry. 4th is the ability to use outdoor space for instruction. Although I feel it's a great idea to explore the use of outdoor space and use it when available, it seems like an unrealistic condition for return given the unpredictability of spring weather. So my question is, 6 feet distancing is currently the recommendation. However, 3-foot distancing was the recommendation for quite some time. Is the committee willing to entertain 3-foot distancing? To the best of my knowledge, parents and teachers have not been polled regarding a full return, so it's next to impossible to truly know where people stand on this topic unless they are speaking up and writing letters and communicating with this committee. The most vocal voices get heard, but many of those voices speak in generalizations and on behalf of people they have no right speaking for. The 187 families whose names have been scrolling on my screen support a full return to in-person learning as soon as possible. We implore this committee to examine the 4 conditions outlined and decide now what constitutes a safe return so we can get our kids back in school as soon as possible. And I really hope that is prior to April 26th. Thank you for your time this evening. Now let's work together to get our kids back in school. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next public comment is Catherine Joyce.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, good. First, to the committee members, thank you very much for your service. I will try to make this as brief as possible. The kids need to go back. The academic and mental health, physical health, the damage that's being done is detrimental to all of them, and we don't know how long it's going to take to dig out of the hole that they're all in. BC High has been going back full time since the start of the fall. My kids want to go back. They did the enrichment program over February vacation, and as far as I know, everything was fine. And I don't see the difference between that enrichment program and going back full time. The transportation issue has been solved. Let's get these kids back. Get them all caught up and socialized, and let's get them all healthy and happy again. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next person is Sarah Ferguson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I have some notes I'm going to read off right now. So good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to first thank the Plymouth Public School System for doing an excellent job implementing strategies to keep the public schools open and safe for now. I would like to touch on a few points regarding an email I sent to the school committee members prior to the retreat. In a Washington Post article published on December 6, 2020, titled "A Lost Generation," studies have shown that students have regressed through 2020 in math. This should not be a surprise. The Plymouth Public Schools were not equipped to handle this transition and many students did not have the technology or adult guidance to succeed at home in 2020. Additional studies have shown that high intensity
You're cutting in and out.
children up to speed. This
You're
is true. Families.
Can she hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
You're just cutting in and out a little bit, so I don't know if you need to get
Okay.
closer to the, thank you.
Additional studies have shown that high intensity tutoring summer programs are
No, I think it's a connection.
Oh boy. Okay.
Okay. We
Can you
can
hear me
hear
now?
you when you lean completely in, yes.
Okay. Okay. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Oh boy. Okay. Where did you stop hearing me? Did you never hear me?
Probably pretty close to the beginning. You were in and out, like we'd hear certain parts.
Okay. I'll make it quick.
The study, I know.
So, in a Washington Post article published on December 6th titled "A Lost Generation," due to loss of classroom time in the spring of 2020, particularly in math, this should not be a surprise. The Plymouth public schools were not equipped to handle adult guidance to succeed at home.
I think we lost connection. Oh, weird. Okay. All right. We'll just come back to her and maybe we can reestablish a connection. Make it a little clearer, sorry. Or if you want, if you would, can we include her statement if she sends it to us in a, yeah, if you send it to us in an email, that'd be wonderful, and then we'll get a chance to read the article and your comments.
Okay.
Or we can try again next week, of course. All right, sorry about that. We're gonna move on to Dale Weber. I see him.
Thank you, and good evening, school committee. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak and address the committee on this important matter. My name is Dale Weber, and I'm an employee representative, also a taxpayer and a ratepayer of Plymouth. But I currently represent 7 different employee groups in Plymouth. 4 of those employee groups are in the school system. Custodians that clean the building, the skilled tradesmen that keep the building up to par for its infrastructure, cafeteria workers who feed your children, and the head custodians that oversee the whole infrastructure. I also represent the employees that deliver the precious cargo to our schools. Those are your students that ride the school buses every day. We are currently and patiently awaiting our turn at getting vaccinated, as we are in phase 3. I personally am in phase 2 of the vaccine program, and I am patiently waiting my turn. Many years ago, my grandmother taught me about patience, and I can still hear her words singing true to me today. She would see me getting all frustrated with an issue, all worked up, and she would calmly say to me, "If a string is in a knot, patience will untie it. Patience is a wonderful thing. Have you ever tried it?" She would say that to me, and as much as it would probably get me even more frustrated, as I look back on those days, I now see it as a learning experience. So I think I also want to address the committee to say that both of my children are products of the Plymouth Public Schools, and both have done well in life with successful careers that have been daily challenged by the pandemic and its impacts. So I get what people are saying. I really do. My daycare issues have multiplied substantially in trying to help out my kids, and I'm glad to do that. But as a proud grandparent of 5 in public schools, I applaud the practices to date of our Plymouth Public Schools, but I also would advocate for waiting until vaccinations for all school staff happened prior to a total reopening of our system. So on behalf of my grandkids who have adjusted in their own way to the past year of modifications, I ask for all to be patient and wait for their turn at the federal system of establishing the vaccination program. This is ironic that we're meeting today on a day that we face the grim milestone of losing over 500,000 people to this horrible virus. I feel we have a certain allegiance and we owe it to those souls to give the vaccination process a chance to handle the surge. I thank you for your time this evening, and I appreciate speaking on it.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Lisa Macmillan.
Hi, I'm Lisa Macmillan. I live on Wagon Wheel Road in Plymouth. And like many others, I have 3 boys at the Nathaniel Morton School District. I applaud everybody for the work that they've done and how they've adjusted schedules to meet the needs of the kids this year. On behalf of the teachers, though, I feel that they deserve an equal and fair opportunity to be vaccinated prior to rushing back into the building. 3 buildings within the town of Plymouth cannot accommodate the number of kids that they have, even within the 3-foot distance. So we're looking at squishing those kids in within less of the limitation of the 3 feet. I think that even though numbers are going down, we need to see them trend down and stay down for a period of time. And we need to see that plateau and then gradually bring the kids back into the building. I think that if we rush into it and there's a spike, we're going to be back either with fully remote or hybrid again. And now our children have adjusted their schedules 3 times within a small period of time, as opposed to just sticking with what they know and what is working for them and the school systems right now. The numbers in the schools are low. They're staying low because the hybrid program is working. I think if we rush into this, we're going to see numbers spike and parents are going to be unhappy again. So on behalf of the teachers, I think that they deserve vaccinations and a slow rollout of phasing kids back into school when it's safe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Kimberly Allen. Okay. Molly Roommaker? Okay. Oh, she is there. All right, Molly, if you'll unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, I'm Molly Runker. I am a lunch lady in the lunch lady program. I've been in the system for about 5 years. I'm also the union stew for the lunch ladies. I'm really just speaking on the fact that I understand the need to get students back into full-time as soon as possible. However, if the schools were to open back up tomorrow full-time, we would not be able to feed your children. To open up back full-time, we need time to readjust. There are a few factors that we have to have time to figure out. We have a big staffing issue if we opened full-time. We have 19 open positions that we don't need filled because of the hybrid system. And we need to figure out, since we also have a few schools that for days or weeks at a time only have 1 person for the entire school. And we have 1 school, Cold Springs Elementary, that's had 1 lunch lady to do the entire school since mid-October by herself. We need to figure out where our current staff would go if we opened full-time. A lot of our staff members were moved around to different schools, so they'd have to be reassigned. And then the schools they came from, we'd have to rehire for there. And we don't know if our 19 people who left will come back. We also run a grocery bag program where every child in the district can receive groceries every week, every day if they wanted. The bags we make we assemble them by hand. They're filled manually, and we do between 250 and 300 bags are filled every week. Now those bags are filled on Remote Monday because there's no food service. If we get rid of Remote Monday and we keep the food program, we're not going to have time to fill those 300 bags every week. It's impossible. So we have to figure out how to do that while we open at the same time. The other issues are we have food, we give food to the Boys and Girls Club and Algonquin Heights every day. And we don't know if opening full-time would eliminate those programs or be in continuation of full-time food service and 2 extra places to give food to. We also don't know if we wouldn't have enough supplies to open for, I think, 12 schools in the district our lunch service school program works for. We need paper bags, utensils, condiments. It's a lot of stuff we have to order, and some of it can't be ordered and delivered within a day. Unfortunately, Amazon doesn't deliver to us. Some schools are also missing equipment. Cold Springs is missing a freezer. That if we opened full time, that missing freezer would become an issue, and we need time to get that freezer delivered so that we can give your kids food. And then there's also the issue of children eating. They still have to eat 6 feet apart. A lot of the smaller schools cannot accommodate children in cafeterias 6 feet apart. So then we'll have to take over gyms, except certain gyms, like the one at PCIS, is full of equipment that can't fit in the classrooms. So those have to be emptied. Desks have to be assembled. But then what if the students in gyms and cafeterias still don't all fit? We have to figure out places to put them. It's a lot of issues that we have to figure out. And unfortunately, it's a program where issues also like to crop up overnight. I just would like to have that taken into consideration when talking about opening school full time, is that the lunch program needs time. We need maybe a month. I don't know. We need time to figure out these problems to feed your kids, because right now, if we opened tomorrow, we couldn't do it. It would be impossible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, our next one is Kathleen Battles. Is she here? Oh, there she is.
Hi,
Hi.
I need just a minute here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
All right, I'm actually going to read something to you. I feel like it's a more effective way for me to communicate at this moment. My plan is to get through the whole thing. So let me just begin. I sent my original message to Tom and then the school committee over the weekend. I feel like this is an important message, and it really needs to be heard. Our current state of existence is affecting my family on so many different levels. And last week was an especially draining week. And I have several concerns about the pending return to full in-school learning. My brother Paul died here in Plymouth on Friday evening from COVID-19. He was 58 years old. He most likely contracted the COVID in his place of work. This is a place where his employer worked diligently to keep him and his coworkers safe. Paul died within 2 days of his diagnosis. He was a good man. 2 weeks ago, he was a dad, he was a veteran, and he was a fully functioning member of our community. And like many of us, he avoided getting COVID this entire time. He was so close to the finish. He was a shoo-in for vaccination as a veteran this upcoming weekend, but the virus got to him first. My siblings and I have been hyper-focused on our parents contracting this virus, and not one of us imagined that this would devastate us differently. And this is not our only encounter with COVID. We have a family member who got COVID twice last spring. She works in the medical field, or she worked in the medical field. The second time was the worst. She lost her capacity to breathe normally, and she's no longer able to work. She's also in her 50s. A woman I'd known since childhood died last summer from COVID. She was 47. And I'm saying this because these ages matter. I am one of the few members of my family to be vaccinated, and I believe that this is why I didn't contract COVID when I was exposed. And unfortunately, I was in that situation because there just isn't enough space in our buildings. So I'm also a parent, and my daughter's a senior. She started off this year with the remote learning model simply because she's worried about my mom. but that model was setting her up for failure. There was no one to talk to and no one to process the learning, and the lessons were not properly dispersed. So she returned to the building. This lasted for about one physical day in the building, and although she rarely sees any of her friends, she had lunch outside of school with a single classmate to talk about her schedule and her classes, and that led to a quarantine for about 2 weeks. She then returned in time for the December break, and then one day in the building, and in the learning changed again, and this time it was a full week of remote learning. The details were shared at 7 p.m. and they were scheduled to start at 7 a.m. the next day. This is not a fault. This was a necessary action. And once this adapted version for instruction was over, she resumed the hybrid model. And this soon became the hybrid with 20-minute logins throughout the day. Now she is scared and frustrated that she will have to once again adapt to a schedule that it's really ruining what's left of her life as a high school student. She loves her teachers. She has some pretty special memories with some of our administrators. You guys have done great things with her over the years. She has loved her entire school experience up to this year. At this point, she just wants to graduate in a way that provides her with a gentle departure. She doesn't think it's going to happen at this rate. I also want to point out that we can't vaccinate the eligible people in the phase that we're in right now. And the vaccine will take weeks to be effective. As far as the children are concerned, Emma's group will be in a much later date. And of course, this worries her because of my mother. In addition to staff lives, she is concerned that the full return just weeks before graduation will result in another COVID outbreak. She doesn't want to quarantine through graduation because she has not contracted the virus yet. My elderly mother lives with us. She is medically compromised, and despite my mother's eligibility, we can't get her vaccinated. There are no available appointments anywhere in our state for weeks, and we've been trying since Thursday, the day it became possible. As an educator, I value my students and my families, and I don't want to come across as an us versus them. I just want people to stop and think and include all the stakeholders in the plans for our future. If my daughter doesn't want to attend a full model setting the last 3 weeks of her senior year, she really shouldn't be forced into this. It's approximately 6 or so days of additional highly stressful circumstances that she shouldn't have to go through. And I'm not sure what she's going to learn during this time. She is more afraid than ever that her grandmother will die like her Uncle Paul. And it feels like we are forcing a situation at the tail end of a fight. I think educators deserve the right to be vaccinated and to work in the safest possible conditions. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. And
Oh, by the way, my name is Kathy Battles. My address is 1 Rodman Lane. I didn't even say that at the beginning.
Thank you. We're so sorry for your loss, but thank you for sharing your story. Kathleen Battles. And then the one thing we would ask everyone to do, if you've already spoken in the public comment, if you could log off and watch on the television, just because it's hard for us to see and find who's we're looking for to speak next. So, but thank you for joining us and for making your comment. The next person we have is Cheryl White. If we have Cheryl.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Okay, I'm not muted. Okay. My name is Cheryl White and I live on Chapel Hill Drive in Plymouth. I've actually lived in Plymouth pretty much my entire life. I'm the parent of a Plymouth North student and I am also a teacher. I've been teaching in person 4.5 days per week since the first day of school. And I do agree with what people have said that children are better off in school full time. Teaching and learning right now is incredibly hard. And our school, though, like many others, has been short-staffed all year. On December 19th, my son played in a basketball scrimmage 5 days into the season. And that night was when his symptoms began. On December 22nd, he was confirmed positive for COVID. And that morning, I contacted the school, his coach, and his teachers. in part, not only because I had a duty to do so, but also because I knew Plymouth North was scheduled to scrimmage Plymouth South that same day at 5 p.m. 3 hours later, I asked some of the other parents if the scrimmage was still on and whether they'd been contacted for contact tracing, but none had. So at 2 p.m. that day, I posted my son's status on social media, knowing that basketball parents would see it and at least have information to make an informed decision for their families. Several parents reached out to thank me, 2 of whom were undergoing chemo and radiation and opted to keep their children out of the game. The next day, I received a weekly email from Plymouth North with the update about positive cases. And I have to say that in the entire fall leading up to basketball, my son did not go anywhere. He didn't go to the supermarket. He didn't go to the barber. He didn't go anywhere. In part because I believe my father was dying at the time, and seeing someone that ill seemed to really drive home to my kids just how dangerous something can be. My father got the flu 3 years ago and went from working 10 hours a day to not being able to walk on his own. So the email from Plymouth North stated, "This report is a clear rise in cases from last week's report that seems to reflect external exposure of our staff and students to the increase of cases outside our building." Now, I don't know why not one child who scrimmaged for 90 minutes with my son the day he got symptoms was designated as a close contact, not a single child. The Department of Public Health wasn't really clear on why that happened either. And I also don't know how the school could make a statement that even seemingly he got COVID outside of school. The only place he had been since March was school. My father died on January 4th, and he died at home, and I could not be there because I was quarantined because 2 days after my son, I had COVID. My son was cleared to resume basketball after cardiac testing, although we were told to watch for certain symptoms. And a full month after his diagnosis, I watched his away game via live stream. I watched while he repeatedly touched his chest and sat down within the first 5 minutes of the game. Alone in the bleachers, he sat and I watched him text, "I can't breathe." His pediatrician told me to get him to the emergency room. He was placed on an emergency health plan due to a risk of sudden cardiac arrest due to COVID. His COVID infection had been mild. Our schools are not yet able to manage COVID effectively, and I don't simply mean Plymouth. I mean every school that I've been in. Please know that I do not mean that as a criticism. I think we just need more time to increase vaccinations and reduce community spread. According to the February 18th weekly COVID tracker for the period from January 1st through February 16th, Plymouth's percent positivity rate for the prior 14 days was 4.72%, which is in the red zone. According to the Harvard Global Health Institute, as of February 21st, Massachusetts is in the orange zone, not the red, as we have 24 daily new cases per 100,000 people, which indicates escalating community spread. The threshold for red status is 25. There are only 11 states in our country who have higher numbers than Massachusetts. So where will we be when twice the current number of students are entering the building? I understand that private schools, BC High, Thayer, they've all been fully in person, but they have more financial resources, lower enrollments, and an exponentially smaller enrollment of children with behavioral concerns who may be better, therefore they're better able to manage safety guidelines than your typical public school. I understand that there's little evidence of in-school transmission, but there's also little attempt to find evidence. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. I understand that people feel their kids are falling behind. I teach special ed. All of my kids are falling behind. They fall behind on a good day, but the entire country is in the same boat. When US News Reports and World Rankings looks at how well each state educates children in its public schools, it routinely places Massachusetts as #1 in the country. Nearly everyone has been traumatized to varying degrees by the uncertainty and chaos that has invaded our lives in the past year. Traumatized and overwhelmed people don't think clearly. They crave normalcy, even at great risk. The familiar, even when it's dangerous, is what we crave. Unfortunately, that is a trauma response, and it cannot be the basis on which we make decisions that impact the health and safety of our community. That's all I had, so thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. Our next public comment is Sarah Maloney.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
Hello, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Sarah Maloney. I live in Plymouth. I've been a resident of Plymouth for the last 10 years. Mom of four, I'm a special needs mom, and I also work full-time as an emergency room nurse in a level 1 trauma center in the city. The last 4 years, I've had the pleasure of working very closely with the Plymouth Public School systems with my oldest 2 sons who attend Federal Furnace. I've seen firsthand how hard the educators, therapists, ancillary staff work to provide excellent education to our children. This year's been no exception in the effort put forth by the staff and the administrators to provide excellent learning opportunities for our kids. So thank you for that. I think we can all agree, though, despite these efforts, we have glaring weaknesses in the current education model. I've watched my kids exhibit extreme frustration in not only the academic realm, but also seeing how this current model has affected their social and emotional well-being. And as an emergency room nurse, I can speak to that professionally as well for my patients that have been coming in. It's not only frustrating as a parent to be unable to alleviate these stressors, but it's also not sustainable. Many families in the district like ours have 2 working parents, either in or out of the home, and the added burden of assisting in educating our children while managing our professional lives is not sustainable. And this doesn't even speak to the folks in the district who have lost their jobs or had to decrease their hours in order to educate their children. The majority of us are not educators, and we're unable to cater to our children's needs as teachers can. They're teachers who have master's degrees in how to do so effectively. I'm addressing the school committee this evening with my concerns regarding continuation of the current hybrid model and proposing the return of our children to full in-person learning earlier than the proposed date of April 26th. The memo we received earlier this month identified 4 barriers to return to full in-person learning in the Plymouth Public Schools, including continued low virus transmission in the schools, transportation, vaccination of educators, and the use of outdoor spaces for social distancing purposes. Since the distribution of this memo, DESE has lifted the restrictions to transportation of school-age children. The numbers in the district for school transmission has remained incredibly low. This is in large part due to the extreme diligence that Plymouth has shown in implementing almost all of the techniques that the CDC has recommended for COVID-19 risk mitigation. The district's plan to return the end of April so as to use outdoor spaces for social distancing purposes is unreliable. The weather in New England during the early spring months is unpredictable. When speaking with Dr. Campbell earlier this week, he identified other uses of indoor spaces to conduct lessons and socially distance. Furthermore, the CDC as well as DESE indicate that distance of less than 6 feet is acceptable, particularly when virus transmission mitigation tactics are being implemented, including the wearing of masks of our teachers and students, frequent hand hygiene, improved ventilation, more frequent sanitization of surfaces, and minimizing the shared use of materials between students. If you go on the CDC website and the DESE website, Plymouth has actually implemented almost all of the risk mitigation tools that have been recommended. So well done. The final identified barrier to return was the vaccination of staff prior to full return of students to the school. Though I understand the comfort levels of individuals surrounding the virus varies, I challenge you to look at the thousands of others in the working force who have worked through this pandemic without receiving the vaccine. I myself have worked for a year, like I said, in an emergency room without receiving the vaccine. Our community's hardworking firefighters, police officers, cable workers, grocery store workers, and countless others have continued to work through this pandemic. Many of these in our community have worked with a higher risk population than our students. The majority of our private school counterparts have had full in-person learning since the beginning of the school year with little to no remote days. Our children deserve the same opportunity to learn. We need to follow the science, is what we've been told throughout this last year. All, not some, of the governing bodies in the realm of education and medicine have told us we need our children to return back to school for not only their academic, but also social and emotional well-being. The end of this pandemic is not known. To continue to expect our children to learn in a model where they are expected to be independent learners is unacceptable. In the same sense, to expect teachers to have to make up for the huge discrepancy in material is unfair. Please, Plymouth, we need to follow the science on this one. We need to bring our children back to school earlier than the date of April 26th. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our next one is Thomas Pinto. And I don't
Hey everybody,
see him.
good evening.
There he is. Good evening.
Okay, good. Good evening. For you, those who don't know me, Tom Pinto. I live at 14 Cooper Street, Plymouth. I am currently the president of the Education Association of Plymouth and Carver. I'm a lifelong Plymouth resident. I'm a proud product of Plymouth Public Schools and a parent. And as a parent, I can understand the stress that parents have been put under this year. Students missing full-time in classroom instruction, having to make arrangements for both student Zoom instruction and their work schedules, meeting the social, emotional needs of their children while balancing their health and safety. It has been a difficult school year. Within the hybrid model, which we are currently operating under, our teachers, paraeducators, and secretaries have worked very hard to provide exceptional education services for our students. This model has made physical distance as a recommendation by the CDC possible while giving students smaller classroom sizes. I'm very proud the way our staff has adapted to these difficulties this year has presented. But we still as a community have a long way to go. The CDC in their newest updated February 2021, has provided new guidance on how schools can safely reopen for in-person learning. In-person learning being defined as teaching in person at least one day a week. They recommend that the first step is in considering whether to reopen schools should be look at the level of spread within the community. Quoting the CDC, all schools can safely reopen for full in-person learning if they follow appropriate protocols and are located in communities that are in low levels of transmission. We are not there yet. Unfortunately, Plymouth, according to the state risk code, is still at a high transmission level. We continue to maintain the level of red. One step regarding reopening is we must be able to offer all staff the vaccine. CDC, sorry about this. Although the vaccine are not mandated by the CDC, they do provide protection we need. The EAPC has been working and organizing at both the community and state level, trying to get the vaccine for our staff so that we can safely reopen our school full time. But there is something the Plymouth community could do. We need to bring the levels of transmission down to a safe level. These are not my words, but the advice of the CDC. They recommend that the safest way to open schools is to ensure that there is as little disease as possible in the community. We need to work together to bring our levels of transmission down. My members want to bring their students back, but only if it can be done safely. Thank you for everyone's time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Dan Ferrand. Maybe.
Hi, Daniel Foran, 26 Palmer Road. I have mostly, I attempted to come on here once before, but I kept my opinions to myself. So I'm going to go all the way back to August when the school committee met to go with this hybrid plan. Public comment wasn't included. We were allowed to submit an email. Our emails were read. Hopefully our emails were read. You know, I'm a big proponent that these meetings sooner than later need to get back to in person so that people can get up in front of the microphone. They can see faces. Currently on the screen, I see a lot of school committee members that I've never met. I've actually never met Mr. Campbell either. Be great to have a in-person, face-to-face conversation. That being said, in August, we were told that we needed to follow the CDC. Those words are burned into the brains of every parent in Plymouth. We need to follow the CDC. We need to follow the guidelines. We need to follow the data. We're experts on those words. We've heard that over and over again. Back in August, when the hybrid plan, and I believe it was Florida, that was going back to school before everybody else in the country, we were told, oh, watch, look how crazy their numbers are going to be. The numbers are going to skyrocket. The schools are going to close. Everybody's going to get sick. We were made out to believe that fear, we were led to believe in fear, that we'd be afraid to send our kids back to school. Those numbers simply didn't materialize. That data didn't come to fruition. My son originally attended a school out of district. It was a vocational school. He was traveling 45 minutes a day to go receive a vocational education that he simply wasn't receiving. He recently transferred back into Plymouth in January, excuse me, back into January. But throughout the process, I've had numerous phone calls with Mr. Campbell, just discussing what Plymouth's plan was, how Plymouth was operating, where Plymouth schools saw themselves going throughout the year. And every one of those conversations, there was the roadblocks that were laid out, the 4 roadblocks that we've heard over and over tonight. Up even recently over February vacation, I spoke with Mr. Campbell again, based on the data and those roadblocks being lifted. Mr. Campbell had mentioned a couple things. One thing he had mentioned was that cafeterias were kind of being used as a storage facility. Tonight, we also heard a school cafeteria worker mention that the school doesn't have a freezer. It just seems like every one of these things. My father used to work in a job where they had the 5 Ps. It was called prior planning prevents poor performance. There was another P that you could throw in there, but prior planning prevents poor performance. And all of these issues that we've heard tonight with prior planning from the school committee would be no issues. A freezer, how long have we known that the freezer is not working? How long have we known that the cafeteria was being used as storage? All during February vacation, we should have been clearing out those cafeterias and those new learning spaces, if you will, to make sure that they're ready for the day that we can finally get our kids back to school. In addition, I mentioned in the beginning, we've been told again and again, CDC, follow the data. Finally, all of the data says back to school in person. It's time to get these kids back to school. We heard from the union representative, Mr. Pinto, who stated that he wanted us to follow CDC, but then he said that all staff should have the vaccine. Well, the CDC, and I believe the infamous Dr. Fauci, says that that's not the case. Requiring staff to have vaccinations is not a precondition to get these kids back to school. That is the case, that they do not need the vaccinations to get these kids back to school. Again, if anybody's uncomfortable with not sending their kid back to school, there's options available. Remote learning. I'm not sure if the school would offer them to continue on the hybrid plan, but there's certainly options available for the minority that doesn't want to send their kids back to school full time, to continue in a way that makes them feel safe. We heard too about patience, and we need to have patience. And there was an example there provided about untying a knot. I think the parents of Plymouth have been extremely patient since April of last year. We've been very, very patient. We've been waiting for a school committee to come up with a plan to be ready to get our kids back to school. I had asked back when the busing was still an issue if there was any written documentation that was sent by the school committee to the state to get these kids back to school on buses. Thankfully, that's been lifted. Frankly, it's just time to get these kids back to school. There's literally nothing holding back other than you school committee members casting a vote. When you cast that vote, it's up to you to get these kids back to school. It's literally in your hands now. The CDC, the data, the state, the governor, Fauci, everybody. time to get these kids back to school. There's not one piece of data that says Plymouth Public Schools should not be back to school full time. And I would just hope that, you guys have had a plan to get the kids back to school and we're ready to rock and roll. And I would kindly ask that somebody make a motion tonight to up that return to school date from April 26th to the middle of March. I see Miss Savory shaking her head in opposition to that. But it would be really great if we could get these kids back before April 26th so that they can get the education they deserve, get back in school, and we start headed in the right direction for these kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I just want to go back and see if we missed anybody who might be on that we didn't. We gave everyone an option. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we got everybody before we moved along. It looks like I don't see, yeah, because Terry Moore, so I don't see Kelly. Yeah, I don't see those names up in front of our screen, so I guess we're done. And just to thank everybody for their time.
Sarah needs to get off.
Thank everybody for their time and sharing their thoughts with us this evening. We're very appreciative of that. All right. Now we will move on to, let's see, our Plymouth North, our student, do we have, no, she wasn't able to make it. Yep, go ahead, Ms. Grimes. Okay. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. We can move right past, and we'll come back and we'll get their update next week. It's not like we have a long time between meetings. Thank you. All right. Moving along. All right. Now we're on to our Plymouth South Middle School. Dr. Campbell?
Yes, thank you. So this evening we have a school improvement plan update from Plymouth South Middle School, and Principal Murphy has just joined us via Zoom, so we'll give him a moment to make a connection and start momentarily. And I just lost him on my screen.
Yeah, I was going to say he was right there.
So Mr. Murphy, if you're watching at home, please log in. I will, yeah.
He was just there.
He's coming back right now. Hold on 1 second. Let Mr. Murphy back in.
Wonder if Zoom.
There we go.
Good evening. Sorry about that. My computer froze.
No worries.
I will be projecting my screen if I am given the chance to do so.
Yes, Mrs. Burgess, this is Principal Murphy from Plymouth South Middle School. Yep. And we just lost him again. So Mr. Murphy must be having connectivity issues.
Sure. Oh, is he? Oh, okay, I thought he was coming back. The beauty of Zoom. All right. Should we move ahead to policies for now and wait for him to be reestablished? Anybody have any problems with us moving ahead?
No.
Well, why don't we go ahead and talk about policy 9.3,
Yes,
the
why don't
homeless
we-
education,
okay.
and then just keep it going, and when he rejoins us, we can get back going, get back
That's
on
great.
our roll.
Sure. So we have two policies to present to the committee tonight. The first one is homeless students, enrollment rights and services. This is, it was actually redone last year, right around the same time. There was a slight change. Thank you. I'm still echoing. There was a slight change in the law with regard to a student's school of origin. So this policy is just reflective of the changes that took place over the summer. Are there any questions specifically to this policy?
Anybody have any questions? Anybody up on Zoom? I don't see anybody. I actually have a question on, actually, you know what? I think I have my questions in the wrong place, so never mind. I don't have any questions.
This was the easy one, so.
Yep, sorry. All right, do I have a motion?
Are you looking for a motion?
Yes, please.
That we,
Mrs. Burgess.
adopt policy 5.1 for the homeless education.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Perfect. All right, any comment? All right, I guess we'll roll call. I guess we'll start up with Zoom up above us. Ms. Haywood? Is that a yes? Yes, okay. Ms. Savory?
Yes.
Mrs. Burgess?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Pisano?
Yes.
Dr. Sorensen?
Yes.
And I, chair says yes, so that's unanimous. Thank you for my word. It was anonymous was the only thing that would come to my mind. Sorry about that. All right. Now, do we want to go back to Mr. Murphy now that it looks like he might be?
You want to do the next policy then?
Okay, we can finish policies.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
The next policy might take a little bit of time, and I don't want to hold Mr. Murphy up because he's got little guys at home, so.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the Plymouth South Middle School Improvement Plan.
Yeah.
Mr. Murphy.
I'm so sorry about that. So I'll try this one more time. I think when I'm trying to jump over to my presentation, my screen was freezing. I know there's a backup plan. It's not as aesthetically as pleasing, but if I have the ability, if I'm given the ability to screen share, I can try to see if I can.
Yes, you have ability right now, Mr. Murphy. You should.
Here we go. Let me try this one more time. And
There we go.
just come back to. Present. Can everybody see this okay? We're on the title slide?
Yes.
Great, all right. Well, hopefully that situation has been resolved. So this is the Plymouth South Middle School Improvement Plan update. As you can probably imagine, very much like both of the high schools, our plan is there's been certain parts of it that we've had some successes with. We've made some changes, some slight changes to some of our original plan to adapt to COVID. And then, of course, there have been some parts that we'd like to make more progress on, and we have been limited because of the pandemic. And so I'd like to just start off by saying thank you to those folks who have served. We've had a variety of parents help build our plan, different teachers serving. Mr. Gagnon, our assistant principal, has also been pivotal in helping to run the school council, generate ideas. So thank you to all those folks who have served. So I'd like to just jump right in. We have 3 goals in our plan. Our first one, it talks about student social emotional growth. Our second goal is to try to increase family and community engagement. And then, of course, there's a goal about academic achievement of students. And so the rest of the presentation will speak to each of those goals in that order. So our first goal, one of the challenges that we've had this year because of COVID is, and because we didn't take MCAS last year, is it's always been a very helpful tool for us to take a look at how we compare over time year to year, and also how the groups of kids as they move from one grade to the next are performing, and we can take a look at their growth. And then of course we can look at a particular grade over years, like how particular 7th grade classes compare to the ones previous or after them, and how and we could do that in mathematics, we do that in science, and we do that in English. And so because we have that gap in our MCAS testing, and even this year, it's a concern, I think, for myself a little bit moving forward, that we're going to have an abbreviated version of this. We had to really take a look at some of our other data that we have and ask ourselves, what do we have available? Do we have enough? And so I'll be talking about that, and you might hear me, you're going to hear me speak about Panorama, and I put together a school culture survey. And so when we're talking about some of our different goals, some of that information has been pulled from there. As well as a reading inventory test that we give, as well, and a star mathematics test that we give as well. So 2 of our tools are our Panorama. We had a really comprehensive presentation given to us from those folks in Panorama. We had 511 out of 638 students surveyed. That's nearly 80% of our kids were able to take this survey. And it really told the story of how kids were feeling, I think, during COVID, if we go back to like last spring, and then how kids were feeling about returning to school in the fall. We compared very favorably in just about every category when we were compared to the other schools in Plymouth, which it gave me a good feeling that some of the work that we've been doing to make the kids feel comfortable during these tough times has been paying off. I think we'd like better results, but when we compared to some of our other schools, we were in pretty good shape. Some areas that I guess it showed that we had some opportunities for growth. The kids feeling connected and their ability to speak with friends. And when we dug into this data about feeling connected, I think really the concern there was feeling connected with adults. It's tough to hear, but I think that it makes a lot of sense. With the distancing that we put in place, with everybody wearing masks, I feel like personally this is something that's been a strength of mine, knowing I try very much to know every single student's name in the building, and that's a hard task. And I'm a real visual learner, and when their faces are covered up, I was just telling my guidance counselor in 6th grade this the other day, it's been a real challenge for me to match names and faces this year. And I think that, in some ways I'm like a big kid. I think that the kids are the same way when it comes to their teachers, when it comes to their peers that they didn't know, that maybe came from a different elementary school. And so I don't know that they feel as connected as they have before in the past. And so we're working on that. I think that it's a nice opportunity for us moving forward into the future, but the data certainly does support that. And I think that piece about them feeling connected to their friends. I mean, there's very limited opportunities of athletics, after school activities, so on and so forth. And so those opportunities to have class with some of their friends that they might not normally have because they're on opposite cohort days, or to find a new friend because they're in the drama program, or they're doing concerts together after school, they're just not there. Our staff was also surveyed, and again, we had fairly favorable results. Our biggest opportunity for growth, according to what the staff feedback was that they felt like they needed more relevant professional development. And so when I took a look at those results, I started having informal conversations with the teachers. One of the things I thought I needed to do was to dig a little bit deeper. And we'll talk about that in a second. I wanted more specifics. And then we got results from our families. We had fairly average results. I think one of the things that the families were asking for was they wanted more communication. And so I've been thinking about that. I've been asking a lot of folks. I've asked my PTA, I've asked my school council. The thing that I've had a hard time figuring out is when this survey was given in the fall, if it was a lack of communication or if it was the timing of when the survey was given. I think that opening school at the time that we did, no one's ever gone to school like this. No one's ever ran a school like this during COVID times. And so I think a lot of the parents had a lot of questions about that. So that's something I'm going to continue to look at as we move forward and see if there's other means of communication. I will say that I've had some conversations with some of the folks that help us manage Aspen, our data management system. And we do have the ability, and I think that Dr. Campbell and Dr. Rogers can probably speak to this a little bit if they'd like to, but I think that there's a want from some folks out there that any school notifications would get text to people's cell phones. And I think that that's a capability that we have, and we may be looking at moving forward in the future, not at Plymouth South Middle School per se, but across the district. Coming back to some of those results that we got from the staff from our panorama survey, I wanted to ask the teachers more about what they were thinking about professional development and teaching during COVID. And so I gave them a school culture survey. We had some really nice responses, some very favorable responses about the way that the teachers are feeling about doing this work this year, and that they felt like they were given enough time to plan instructionally, and that, as a school, even though we're in this time during COVID, that our values as a staff has sort of remained strong, and that all the decisions that have been made either last spring, this fall, or through the winter, that they felt like they're getting a chance to give feedback and they're being heard. But some of those opportunities that they felt like we could do better at as a school was collegial awareness. And so what I mean by that is, the ability to know what's going on in other classrooms, what's going on in other grades that you don't teach, what's going on in those specialist classes. Like, for example, the art teacher may not always know what's going on in health class, or, the technology teacher may not always know what's going on in 8th grade English class. And so doing things like that to make sure that everybody's on the same page and they're aware of what's going on in the building. And so that there might be those chances to team teach and have some connected teaching that way. But they also are asking for some more time to discuss student achievement. It's particularly those students that might be struggling academically. I think the teachers down at South Middle have been asking for that. Not that they don't get it, I think that they want more. And so there's an opportunity there as well. When in terms of professional development, it was very clear that the teachers wanted more time when we could give it to them. They can continue to develop teaching in their curricular areas, whether it was planning on how to use Chromebooks, utilizing online resources more in the new way that we're teaching. Many of the teachers have worked extremely hard to try to take those things that they would have done more in person and transition it more online and make it more readily available to those students when they're at home. The struggle continues, and I think like anything else, the effort for those teachers, it's not there. I think that they just need more time to continue to refine their craft. And so I've started to give them professional development opportunities with that. It's been very well received. The teachers have been thankful for that. And you know, it's nice for me to report, I think that they're developing their skills in these areas where maybe they were weaknesses, they're starting to become strengths. The other thing, we heard some folks in the public comment talk about this. I think that more than ever, the teachers are concerned about some of the students' mental health. They're worried about not seeing them every day. They're worried about you know, students that are coming in and they're not as open and active and bubbly as they normally are. And so those are things that you know, they shared as a concern. So we're going to be working on them down South Middle. As part of the first goal, I wanted to break it out and talk to you a little bit about some of the things we've been doing to promote students' social emotional growth. And we'll talk a little bit about what we've been doing to help the staff as well, because I think this year's been particularly trying on them. So we've had the relationships with South Bay and Gosnell Counseling. We've continued that. As a matter of fact, I think our caseload, it's grown a bit, and we were able to bring in a third counselor. We had one counselor from each of those agencies, and we now have another counselor to meet the needs that we had down South Middle and the number of students involved. And so I've been happy about that. We've utilized that extra counselor. We made some staffing shifts last year where we were able to bring in a part-time adjustment counselor. We're really the only school of our size in Plymouth previous to that didn't have an adjustment counselor. So that's a really good thing, because that staff member, even though they only work 2 days a week, they're taking on therapy sessions with the students and working to help meet their needs as well. A program that we've ran in the past, Drug Story Theater, where teens come in that have had substance abuse issues, and they're in recovery. Part of their recovery, they tell their story, they act it out for our kids. I didn't want to let that go. I had my assistant principal contact those folks. They do have an online version of the program this year, so we're able to figure out a way to continue that education for our 6th grade kids. And we're doing it through our health classes. So when a 6th grade student goes through the health rotation, they're still getting that education as well, which is great, because I was under the impression that we might lose the program for the year. More recently, through the winning of a grant, we had an agency called Karen also present to our 6th grade students about anti-vaping issues, and educating them on the health concerns. I think that there's still a lot of misinformation out there for the youth about the effects of vaping on student health. So that was a program we just had right before February vacation. And nearly all of our 6th grade students were exposed to that program as well. We have been writing, I know this might sound like a small thing, but I think we've got really a lot of positive feedback about this. We have a student spotlight program where I've asked the teachers at the beginning of our staff meeting to pick a student or two, write a postcard home. But a student who's tried really hard, but they're putting in good effort, they're showing good faith in their studies, they're being a good citizen, whatever it is that we can recognize them for, because I think this has been a particularly hard year on the kids. And so it's interesting. Every time I'm asking the staff to do this, which is every few weeks, I'm getting emails from parents saying like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. We really needed some good news. This has been a tough year for my child. And so we'll continue to do that. It's a nice practice. I think the teachers enjoy doing it. It doesn't take a long time, and it really does make that home to school connection. And I think it puts a smile on everybody's face. And finally, we continued our use of the CASEL program. The CASEL program is a social emotional learning program with 8 different components, where we actually are teaching kids specific skills and strategies to interact with others and to manage themselves. We'll continue that work as well. As far as the staff goes, some of the professional development that we've had down in South Middle School this year really has been around heightening their awareness in terms of what it feels like, what this might feel like, the challenges that the students are facing, but also giving them a chance to express their frustrations with the way that the education is going. No teacher's ever been trained to teach this way, and so they've made a lot of changes on the fly. We have had a variety of faculty meetings where we're reaching out to different families. We're working on different forms of communication, whether it's through social media, using Google Classroom effectively, putting an emphasis on our own self-care and taking care of our families. We have had our district social emotional coach, Cheryl White, come in. She had ran a training at a staff faculty meeting for us about grief and loss during a pandemic. I think that some of the teachers are identifying with their loss of normalcy in their life. They're going through stages of grief, and yet they're still employed. They're still working with kids. So we needed to address some of that. And of course, social emotional. We've also continued our social emotional learning in terms of training our staff and embedding some of those practices into their instruction. One of the other things we've done is we have book clubs where the teachers were asked to pick one of the 3 books below, Maslow Before Bloom, Brain on Fire, and Reviving Ophelia. And each one of those books talks about personal trauma that either students or children have faced, and we're using that as sort of a book club opportunity from time to time to read, to reflect, and to then make the connection between what we read in these books and like how are our students feeling, how are we feeling, and then how do we address that so we can still meet their educational needs. There's other things we've been doing. More recently, we've made a connection with Hot Yoga 1620 in Cedarville. On Wednesday afternoons, they're running a yoga group for Plymouth Public Schools educators. Primarily, the folks from South Middle School have been in attendance of that. We're looking at potential professional development opportunities to bring those folks down to our school and do more work with more of our staff. We partnered with the phys ed teachers across the district for a Daily Mile challenge. That is district-wide initiative. There's a lot of different things that we've been doing about self-care. I think a lot of this has been really hard on our teaching staff, and so I'm trying to get them to be mindful of, you're only going to be as good as you are yourself physically. So if you take care of yourself, and some folks need some reminders or strategies of that, then you'll be good with our students and ready to teach. The last part of the first goal revolves around civic responsibility. Some of this, again, is limited. One of the things we've done before is we've always sent a representative to Project 351 to work at the state level through Governor Baker's office. We've continued to do that. We've appointed an 8th grade female student, and more of that work is being done. It's just being done remotely. Our social studies teachers have always pushed kids voting, particularly in the years of the presidential election. That was not a practice that anybody wanted to get involved with this year due to COVID. However, they did use some different Google applications to have in-school voting, and so we modified that. I think there's been a lot of modifying of opportunities this year to try to normalize things as much as we can. Our social studies, particularly our 8th grade civics teachers, have continued to have connections to our local and state reps and use them as guest speakers. More recently, we've appointed a couple teachers to serve as part of the Equity Imperative Project. That is a project where the Department of Education is running trainings, and Plymouth was selected as one of the communities to be a part of this this project, and we have 4 representatives from Plymouth South Middle School will be serving on that, and that project will be looking at really making sure the practices that we have at Plymouth South Middle School are not just equitable for students, but also equitable for staffing as well. And finally, our social studies department is focusing on the implementation of Generation Citizen. That is a curricular piece that we started to bring in last year, which we really didn't get to follow through on. It's a project-based learning program where students identify an issue in their community and they go through a problem solving. You can see the pyramid down below. It's a community issue. They focus in on the issue. They look at the causes. They set a goal and a target, and they really focus in on trying to solve that problem or start to create some solutions to the problem. Some of those topics that students have selected for this year are deforestation, opioid use, and student mental health. And so our civics teachers are working with our students on that currently. So we have future steps for goal 1. Our next steps are to meet those steps that we had set in our 3-year plan, which was to form an LGBTQ and Allies Club. We once had that at Plymouth South Middle School. We need to bring it back and breathe life back into it. We have used prevention screening to target at-risk kids. That screening has been delayed. We're working on trying to figure out the best way to bring that back in. Service learning across all grades, because there tends to be, the need to bring a variety of students together. We have to be cautious on how we approach that during COVID, but I don't want to abandon that. I think our 8th grade teachers are doing a great job with that, and we got to look for those opportunities in 6th and 7th grade as well. And then, of course, I know some of you serve on the diversity committee with myself, and so we're looking at taking some of those practices, that they're district-wide best practices, and bringing them down at the school level, Plymouth South Middle School. In particular, I'm happy to say that on that committee, I serve on a subcommittee for diversity and inclusion in the sense of hiring or retention. And we have been able to hire a few folks this past school year, and they've worked out great. And they have very diverse backgrounds, particularly when you talk about their cultural background. And so that's been a nice addition to our staff at South Middle. That is goal 1. Our second goal is increasing family and community engagement. Again, hard. I feel like this has been a bit of a challenge because I think one easy way to do this is to bring people together. And because of COVID, we've been a little limited, but we've tried to do some things where there's a sense of unity in the school. And one of the things we've done is we've had theme days. South Middle School has had Spirit Week, where the kids and staff have worn pajamas. They've dressed up in green and gold, our school colors, so on and so forth. We've had like costumes around Halloween. We've done Thanksgiving food drives. Our student council has been particularly awesome this year, if you ask me, about trying to create opportunities for kids. And the teachers that run school council have been great. They're meeting with students in person after school. They're meeting with them virtually after school to plan these different activities that we've been doing. And so we'll continue to brainstorm ways to try to be a community down at South Middle during these times that do put some limits on us. Some of the other things that we've been taking a look at, and this is actually fairly new. In the past, we've had our students in 7th grade go to a variety of different places for team building experiences. And so last year we looked at a new program called Nature's Classroom. They're based down on Cape Cod. And we had a plan in place. We were hoping we would be able to go there this past fall. And so all of our 7th grade students would be able to go through some team activities, get to know each other, team build together. And that opportunity was lost because of COVID. I am happy to report that we've continued to communicate with those folks. They'll be coming to South Middle when the weather gets warmer, I think at the end of May. And we will be doing some team building then on campus, following all the COVID guidelines in a safe way. And so this has been the work I think that we've been trying to do in the sense of not letting things go and modifying those things that we wanted to do. The PTA and school council have been fantastic this year down at South Middle. They have continued to support us. They've continued to try to come up with creative ways to support the teachers, the kids. And I will say, I think that we're probably all at a place where we feel like we've done enough Zooms, we've done enough Google Meets. But one of the challenges we've had at South Middle School, I know for a number of years, is getting the parental involvement in PTA and school council in the evening. And I think when I listen to the parents, I think some of it is because of the distance. We have a large population of families that live down in the Buttermilk Bay area. And for some of those folks, it takes 35 or 40 minutes to drive up to South Middle, participate in something, some sort of meeting that might last an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then it's 40 minutes back. It's a pretty good chunk of their evening. And so we've been getting a pretty good turnout with these folks because they're able to jump on and participate from the comfort of their own home. And it's a big time saver. And I think that for the first time that I can see, we have families that are participating, and even if they can only participate for part of the meeting, they do that. And they let us know, like, listen, I can only stay on for 45 minutes and then I got to log off because I've got to get dinner ready for my family or what have you. I'd rather have partial participation than no participation. So in that sense, I think that the technology has actually been helpful to us. And so that's a nice family engagement piece that I'm going to continue to promote. And I want folks to know that they can join us digitally. And finally, we've been sending out Castle Awards. It's a program we started last year. And we have always had, for a long time, our honor celebration. So we've taken those programs and we've transferred them over digitally. And so with the help and support of EdTV, we've recorded those programs. We have sent them out to families. They're being viewed. It's not the same as doing it in person, but it is a good step to continue to try to keep things normal. We continue to work with the folks that are part of PYDC. They continue to share fantastic resources with our school. And I'm really grateful that we have that community resource, because in that one resource, we have so many folks available that are there to help. I am actually particularly looking forward to the growth of the Family Resource Center in the short time that they've been operating. I think they have really shared a lot of great trainings that we're sharing out with families in South Plymouth. And I look forward to continue to work with them and see what other opportunities that they can give to us so we can pass along to our students and families. And so I think it's been a great addition to the community. So our next step for goal 2, if you look over to the right, you see a lot of digital platforms there. I think we need to continue to use social media and promote that. Whatever way families are telling us that information is easiest to get to them is what we need to continue to pursue. And more recently, it seems like getting information or newsletters or updates sent to them through text messages what people want. And so we've got to do some work on how do we do that. One of our goals is to form a student leadership committee. It's something we're going to continue to take a look at. It hasn't got off the ground yet. Again, I think this is sort of a fallen soldier of COVID, but I look forward to when we have all students back in the building and we can start to formulate student representation from all grades, meeting with them possibly, I think probably on a monthly basis, and ask them about the wants and needs of the students in the building. We did hire a new school resource officer. He's been very good, very public with our students. It's something I asked him when we hired him, that he would be getting into classrooms, that he would be co-teaching with our health teachers. He's done all that. And he has a coaching background. He's from the southern part of Plymouth. And so it's a really nice addition because from day one, there were lots of kids that were able to identify with this particular school resource officer, which is really what we want. We want the school resource officer to be a known commodity in the building. So he's been a nice addition to our school as well. One of the other things that the students have brought up to me this year that, again, I've been talking to some folks at central office about this, and I think when we get into next summer, it's an opportunity that is there, is our ability to communicate through email with our students. And when I say that, I mean it on like a mass basis. I think at this point, most of the largest schools in Plymouth at least send out some sort of weekly newsletter. Back in October, I had a number of students come to me and say, Mr. Murphy, why aren't we getting this email to me? And I said, you know what? That's a great question. And so we have the ability to do that before we start the school year. So my hope is that we can get our computer system set up for the next school year and our communication set up so that when we're sending out mass communication to families, we're also sending it to our students. I'm actually happy that this really came to my attention that they weren't able to get this information, because it didn't make a lot of sense to me why. I have an understanding of why now, and I think there's something we can do about it. And when students are asking for information, I think we always want to give it to them. Those are our next steps for goal 2. And here's our last goal. Our last goal is about academic achievement for students. There's some different things that we've been working on down at South Middle. I had to meet extensively with our English coach, our mathematics coach, that they really do a great job of managing all of the academic testing data. Because we were missing MCAS, I had to really take some time and ask them to pull all the information together and then sort of synthesize it. So it was easy to understand, and then even easier to understand in such a fashion where I can present some of it to you tonight. So I have some of that for you. Obviously, I think all the schools have done this now. We've rolled out the Chromebooks. We need to take a look at best practices on how teachers utilize those, how students utilize them. Great tool, but to become a one-to-one school district in such a short time is a massive undertaking. We have the tools now, and I think we got to get better at using them. As a result, one of the things that's happened, because we now are all equipped with Chromebooks, our computer labs are obsolete. The computers that were in those computer labs, they've been aging. Many of them could no longer accept any updates, and they were non-functional. So I began work on really clearing those spaces out, and I began work with the teachers on how we convert those spaces into real, usable, student-friendly teaching environments, different than a classroom. So, some of the jargon in education is flexible learning spaces. And so, I think what that might look like for a 6th grade classroom teacher, for example, what their wants and needs might be maybe a little bit different than an 8th grade teacher. So started to have meetings, and my intention is to rework those spaces, 3 of them primarily, one on each of the floors of South Middle School, and to give them spaces where they can do group collaborative work, where they can have student presentations. I've already started some of the work in there. We've updated the audio in those spaces. We've updated the projectors and their capability. They're all going to be high resolution now. And so I'm excited what the teachers are asking for. We'll continue to work on this, and what I'd like to do is not set those spaces for the short term for COVID, but the long term for the next 5 to 10 years. And so students will want to leave their classroom and to do project-based learning in these spaces. We've made an investment. Plymouth South Middle School has never had new risers. If you don't know what risers are, those are like those stairs that the students in the chorus program typically stand and sing on. Ours are 20 years old. They've been repaired many, many times. We've made an investment to purchase a new set in conjunction with Mike Capel, the visual performing arts coordinator. We've done some work and tried to pull it together, and I'm happy to report that those will be coming. I'm excited about that because, now more than ever, I think that we're missing some of the extracurriculars of school. It really feels that way. And so I think it's going to be a nice addition to our music programming so that when things start to return to normal, we have a nice new set of risers for our music programming. One of the other things we've been doing, we started this year, was ELA learning walks, where I've invited our English language arts curriculum coordinator down to Plymouth South Middle School on a monthly basis. Myself, her, Lisa White, and several other staff members. We walk around, we're looking for best practices in English language arts, and it gives us a chance to informally give the teachers some feedback, whether that is something that they're doing really well, whether they took a risk on something that maybe they're uncomfortable doing and give us some nice feedback for trying something new, or if we see a teacher doing something like stellar, to recommend to their colleagues, like, you'd like to go in and watch that teacher deliver a lesson because they're doing it very well. Like, we've seen it. We would like you to go do that. So it's a nice way for us to take a look at our instructional practices and for us to align things from grade to grade and classroom to classroom in the building. But then I think for the English arts coordinator, it gives her a chance to start looking at things from school to school. We continue to implement some newer curriculum. We're in our second year of instituting Open SciEd, and I've got to give Allison Reardon, our science coordinator, a lot of kudos, and art science teachers. It's a very cumbersome program. It's very hands-on. The students learn a tremendous amount at a very high level. However, under the guidelines and the safety guidelines of COVID, it has been a tremendous challenge. And these teachers have risen to the occasion, and I couldn't be any prouder of them. And a lot of that is due to their motivation, because they see what the students are learning, but also Allison Reardon has done a fantastic job of training those teachers, supporting those teachers, getting them what they need, and then knowing when to get out of their way because they're doing a good job. So the science program continues to grow. We're excited about that. Our English language arts department has taken their curriculum, the Lucy Coppins curriculum, and there's a lot of new online digital components where mini lessons are being taught. They've done a great job of taking those and using them with the students, whether they're in person or at home. Some of the teachers have even recorded their own mini lessons, mimicking some of those curricular updates. And so that's been a challenge as well. So we continue that work, and we're continuing to work on social studies standards that have changed. We're in the second year of implementing some of those standards as well. So here's an academic update on mathematics and English. I've broken this down by grades. The amount of information that I had, I tried to pare it down in the simplest way I could. And so you can see on the left side, there's data there about sixth grade math. And then on the right, there's sixth grade English. So I'd like to talk about mathematics first. You can see that first bullet says student growth percentile since 2019 to 2020. So we were able to take a look at how our students tested with this test last year. And so the way that this assessment typically works is the students take it 3 times a year. They take it in the fall, take it in the winter, and they take it in the early spring. And so we can sort of track their growth throughout the course of the year. Last year, the students were only able to take it twice because we went into closure. The nice part about this is there's lots of school systems across the country, not all school systems, but lots of school systems across the country that use STAR Math as their form of assessing students. And so we were able to sort of track it. How are we doing from 2019 to 2020 if you compare us at Plymouth South Middle School to all those schools that are out there in different parts of Massachusetts, different parts of the country. And what we found is that nearly 55% of our students scored average or above average compared to the rest of the country, which is, believe it or not, a pretty good score. This is something I'm very happy to report. If you look at our growth, now I'm going to go down a little bit here. If you look at our growth since September to the winter, the students took this, they took their second test this year in January. Our student growth this school year in sixth grade math is 69% of our students were above average to average. That's really high. Those are very good numbers. I'm proud of those numbers. And so what we're doing in the hybrid model in sixth grade math, it's working. It's a very similar it's a very similar situation if you look over on the right. In English, we have our student growth percentile from 2019 to 2020. We don't have data on that. And the reason for that is this assessment, the reading inventory, it's not issued in grade 5. So we can't compare ourselves to how we did the year before because the data didn't exist. The students take a different sort of assessment for English language arts in elementary school. However, we can compare how we've been doing this year, and our student growth percentile for this year is 60% of the students are growing at an average or above average growth rate compared to students nationally. I have the same format of data set up for grade 7. On the left is the mathematics data. Our students right around the 59th percentile of growth over the course of the last year, and are right around the 59th percentile of growth for average or above average growth compared to students nationally this year as well. On the other side of things, you can see that we had a very high number of student growth percentile over the course of the year, 76%, which is fantastic. I think that is a testament to the English language arts teachers really putting a focus in on reading, getting the students to continue to read when we were getting ready to go into closure and through the spring last year. And then, of course, if you look down below, we're at about 51% average or above average growth for this school year for grade 7 students. And then finally, our grade 8 academic data, it's a little bit lower. I think that our grade 8 students have been probably hit the hardest by COVID in terms of how they're feeling socially. And I think that some of this data might reflect it. You can see the math data there, the growth over the course of the year, about 39% of our students average or above average growth. And then of course, this year, that number's come up tremendously. I think our math teachers have done a really good job of figuring out how to teach math remotely, to teach math digitally. Oftentimes, I feel like when I hear anecdotes from students about the things that they're struggling with, it's the mathematics. And so when I see that we've jumped from 38% last year up to 53% for this year currently, in terms of where we're growing, that's encouraging. On the other side of things, I think we've seen the opposite effect with English last year. Over the course of the last year, our growth was up in the 54th percentile, and then this year, it's down to 38 percentile. And so, when I first saw this data, I went and I talked to some different folks in our English department, and the thing that they keep saying to me is that when it comes to writing assignments, students they're having a hard time motivating their students to continue to revise their writing. And I think that that's something that really good English teachers, they do that every day with their students. They're also having trouble motivating them to continue to read as fervently as they did last spring. And so we got to continue to look at how do we motivate our students. And so, some of that I think naturally goes away when we do get back into safer times and the students are seeing their teachers each day. So here are some of our next steps to address our academic achievement, goal 3. I really want to take a look at our professional development plan. I'd like to think in the fall things will be back to normal. It's unpredictable, but I'd like to think that way and plan that way. And so if that's the case, we may have the newly adopted middle school schedule. That means less classes per day, but longer teaching periods. We need to plan on how do we intervene for those students who are falling behind or lack the certain skills to perform. That's easier to do if you have a longer period of time. However, it takes more planning up front. And so we've got to do some work with our staff to get them ready for that. And then of course, like the whole piece about teaching to the whole class, whole class instruction, as opposed to a small group or even one-to-one interventions in a class. And then finally, there's a whole piece of our mathematics program that we really haven't been able to get off the ground fully yet. Our big idea is curriculum. There's a workshop model there. And it's like, so, I guess a brief way to describe it is there can be stations in a class where students move around after 5 to 10 minutes and they learn different skills at each station. And so because of COVID, we've sort of had to put that on hold. And there's some professional development and training that we can work with our teachers on that and bring that back when we get into safer times. I think we need to continue to train the teachers on how best to use the Chromebooks with the students. The one-to-one initiative has been amazing. However, I think if we want to make this as effective as possible, we need to continue to build the student and the teacher's skills with the Chromebooks. And then, of course, we're going to continue our CASEL program, and teach those social emotional learning skills, soft skills to our students so that they're successful moving forward. In terms of performance data, one of those pieces of information I was able to pull out of those surveys that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation was teachers asking about how do we have more time to look at student performance. And so we have this great tool in Panorama that allows us to survey students, staff, and families. However, it also really, the real power behind this tool, I think, is it allows us to look at student performance, what direction that they're trending in. Are they trending in positively because they've been doing their work and they're working hard? Are they trending negatively because something's going on in their life and they're not completing their assignments or they're getting lower grades? And so or they've been absent a lot, and we grab those kids and we start making small intervention groups. But we need to have time in our schedule to look at that and use that tool more effectively. I'd also like to see when we get back to normal or safer times, now more than ever, I think this is a very relevant goal, is to get our kids on more field trips. And, a limiting factor of this has always been the last few years, the cost, in particular, the cost of buses and transportation. So really looking at how do we manage that and how do we get the students out of the building? I think they're going to be ready for it when we get back to normal, and hopefully that's next school year or maybe even earlier. And where do we go on those field trips? And then of course we began some of this work where we're really looking at small teams on the English language arts instruction in our building. I'd like to see if we can have our math coordinator, Kelly Bettinas, come down with our math coach and some other staff members and really start taking a look at our math instruction too. And that's it for my presentation. I'd just like to say thank you to all the stakeholders, the folks that support all the kids and staff there, PTA, school council, all of our staff, folks on school committee, central office. And it seems like we have a growing list of community partners. And without them, I don't think that the school is where it is. And so that's it. That's the presentation. That's an update on the school improvement plan. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Wonderful, thank you. Anybody have any questions? Dr. Sorensen?
Mr. Murphy, very good presentation. I think your numbers are excellent. And I want to apologize up front for pointing out one number. You know what I'm going to point out, because we all saw it, and it's that 8th grade number in English and reading. It really concerns me. We're closely, the administrators, the school committee, the teachers, we're closely watching education across, the pandemic, digital, and that number concerns me, and I'm sure it concerns you as well. Any additional comment about it?
It does. I have one additional comment to make, and even with this in mind, it's still a concern of mine. When we first got this data from the reading inventory, the folks that run the company that help us to handle this and handle the testing, they were kind enough to sort of sit down with a team of us and help us pick apart the data and interpret it. And so, your reaction was very similar. This is probably the first time you're seeing this, as my reaction was the first time. And I have to take them at their word for this. One of the things that they had said was, no principal wants to see a score that low. However, where you are across your English scores compared to other communities nearby is way better off. And I didn't necessarily feel too encouraged by that. And then there was another representative from their company that spoke up immediately and said, yeah, you guys are in really good shape compared to what other folks are seeing. And so I think that that's a nice compliment. They'd know better than I would because, they have these meetings with different schools and school systems every day, really. But you always want what's best for your school, for your families, for your kids. And so we can do better than that. We're going to have to look at how we do better. And I don't know what the answer is off the top of my head, but that doesn't mean we're going to abandon it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anybody else? I can't see if anybody else on Zoom has any questions. Can anyone see?
Mr. Murphy, if you could unshare your screen so we can see.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
I'm all set. I don't know if Ms. Hayward
Okay,
is,
now I
but
can see it.
thank you, Mr. Murphy. That was a very detailed, very good presentation. I'm looking forward to all the things that are planned, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, I just have a couple things. I was gonna say the same thing that Dr. Sorensen said, but on top of that, I would love to see like a long-term kind of chart that shows like how our eighth graders are performing over time, or just in general, just to see if that is a typical growth that we're seeing, or, you know, from 5 years ago or 5 years from now, which I think would be really interesting. And then the other two things are just that I love seeing that you have so many more people participating. I've been in on your school councils a lot, and, you know, knowing that sometimes it's you, me, and maybe someone or two other people sitting around the table. So I love hearing that you're having more people on those Zoom sessions. And then your ears are probably burning, and I know I sent you an email the other day, but the collaborative just can't help but be very grateful for you and your staff with how much you've been helping them and doing for them, and they just wanted to make sure we express the gratitude that they have for being in your building. So thank you, and thank you for that presentation.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure listen, they're younger kids in our building, and they bring a nice element, and we're happy to help them. And those are great folks that are doing that work with those kids. So no, it's a nice compliment. Thank you.
Welcome. Anyone else has any questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. And I would, oops, sorry, Dr. Campbell.
Sorry, just a comment, Ms. Badger. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. We will be giving an update regarding the academic progress as we did earlier in the year. You know, when we looked at the data from our closure to the start of the school year. We have additional data that we'll be presenting in the near future regarding ELA and math. Some of these assessments also, you may recall when we presented this information back in January, I believe, was also done at home online for some students. So there may be some variation of results, but those are things that we'll be presenting more information on additional progress since January.
Wonderful, thank you. Anybody
Welcome.
else have any other comments? All right, wonderful. Before we dive deep into our next agenda item, which is the public health emergency policy, I'd like us to take a 5-minute break if nobody has any objection.
Great idea.
Thank you. Usually I have to ask. This time I just did it myself. All right, so we'll return back around 9:06. School committee back into session, and we're now on the policy 9.3, homeless oh, nope, we're not. Sorry, I did not go ahead. We are on the new public health emergency policy. Oh. Well, she'll join us.
Vedna just came on too, see?
Well, I think we can continue. We got a lot to cover, so.
Yep.
Dr. Rogers.
Until they all come, you know.
Thank you. So this is a new policy for us. It was recommended by the Massachusetts Association for School Superintendents and also the Massachusetts Association for Massachusetts School Committees. So I want to thank you to my committee members for working on this. It's taken us a while. We were hoping to get it to you sooner. And we joked during our committee meetings that by the time we finish this, the pandemic will be over and hopefully we never have to implement the policy. However, given the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic, we, under the recommendations, as I just stated, put together a procedures related to public health emergencies, epidemic and pandemic. Again, this would be a policy that was only initiated during a public health emergency. So I don't want to read to you, but I will if people feel like that's helpful.
I think the best thing were if our policy committee members have anything to share, or
sure,
however
Dr.
you want to
Sorensen?
proceed.
Vedna?
Dr. Sorensen?
Vedna may, I'll speak first. It was sort of brought to our attention that our superintendent and other superintendents felt they needed information in writing. If they didn't have a policy, so many decisions that they would have to make would have to keep coming back or having to be discussed. So we tried to create a policy that would give the superintendent as much latitude. Believe me, it's not a perfect policy. We worked on it hard, and I certainly welcome your input. I don't know if Vedna has anything to add.
Saywood?
I really don't have much to add. I mean, this particular policy is also reflective of MASC as well, but we kind of, in terms of looking over it, we kind of tweaked it so that it would, it's more pertinent to our district. So I guess it's more on if you have any questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I had two questions.
Rosanna, go ahead.
First, on item 4.2, concern me, the way it reads, it says the school committee shall authorize a superintendent to activate a back-to-school plan in the most safe and efficient manner possible. That reads to me almost like that approving this policy would allow the superintendent to enact a plan. And I don't think that's what's intended. I think it's more that allows them to develop a plan or activate a plan with, you know, with school committee approval. Just, like I said, I don't think the way it's written is what was probably intended, but if I read that strictly, it basically sounds to me that approving the policy would basically give you a blank check, which I'm sure isn't what's intended. That was
So can you just reference the section, sorry?
4.2.
Okay,
It's a very,
4.2,
very bottom.
sorry. Yep.
Just the wording of it.
Yeah, so the intent was not to sort of allow Dr. Campbell, sorry, Chris, to write a blank check and make the decisions, but it does, the goal would really be for a little bit more flexibility so that, especially during a pandemic when decisions are coming fast and furious from the Department of Education, that there are some decisions that could be made unilaterally without coming back to the school committee for a vote. So it certainly was not the intention, and if there's language in here that you feel
Yeah, but the facility where it says to activate a back-to-school, to me, that means you got a plan, you're putting it in place without that plan actually getting approved. So that was that specific wording.
Yeah.
Like I said, overall, I know what you're getting at, but the way it was worded concerned me.
Okay.
Then again, I mean, obviously, if the superintendent doesn't act in that way, then it's kind of moot, but
Yep.
I think it should be worded to, specific to what you're trying to say there. The only other comment I had, and this might be too specific, but as I read some of the rest of the language, it seemed like maybe it might fit in. I wouldn't mind seeing something related to establishing a testing protocol. And again, that might be too specific because a lot of it was generic, but that was the only, when I looked through it all, that was the only other piece that I saw was kind of missing as anything regarding testing, especially if we're talking about this type of pandemic. If this is trying to apply to general emergencies, that'd be different, but
Right.
this seems very epidemic specific, so those are my only two comments.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions, thoughts? I have, if nobody else has any questions, I have, I kind of had the same thing that you were talking about, that I'm not sure if that language, maybe with consultation with the chair of the school committee, that was kind of my thought. I don't know, obviously the chair doesn't make decisions, but for the whole committee, but I was just trying to think of some way to make it so it wasn't so unilateral. So I had that same thought as well. And then I think maybe, and it could have been when I was reading it, but number 1.10 didn't make complete sense to me, and maybe I just wasn't reading it correctly, where it says, subject to the guidance, and I'll probably read it out loud and get it, subject to the guidance for DESE, the superintendent may suspend or revise the assignment of students to schools, including assignments of new students for such a period as the public health emergency is in force. Is that just saying that if they come in and they're a South Elementary School student, but we have space in virtual school in Nathaniel Morton, they go there, and that's how we're gonna bring them in? That was my...
Yeah, so I think that came about from a lot of schools who moved some elementary school students to a middle school.
Okay.
So it gives us the flexibility to use the space appropriately, given, you know, whatever the guidance might be for the emergency. So 6 feet or 3 feet. So if we had a student move in, or, you know, if we had to move kids from Hedge because of, you know, whatever, Hedge is a smaller building, or the classrooms couldn't accommodate those students, we might have to move them to another building.
Okay.
So these are obviously very extreme circumstances, but we wanted to try to cover our bases, and again, hoping never to enact the policy again.
No, I agree.
What are you talking about anyway?
Number 10, under the 1.10, under section 1, I was just, I didn't quite understand it. Now I get it, that it's more like a big, you're looking at the other situations and not just like new students coming into the district, so that makes sense to me. And then,
Okay, I got that.
my other question, if I can find it, I can't. I didn't know if the 2.2 was necessary, because we already have the photograph and video recording and all that stuff, and I believe one of the technology,
Again, what one are you on?
2.2. 2.2.
2, okay.
2.2, we already have the photograph and audio and like tech policy.
Yep,
I
so it
didn't
is
know.
part of our acceptable use policy, so it is a little bit redundant, you're right.
Okay, I just didn't know if we could just maybe reference that, and then, but not a big deal. And those are my only thoughts that I have. Ms. Savory?
Which one were you had said that you wanted to add chair to it? I don't know how I don't know if I would just word it that way, or word it as notify the chair who will notify the committee. I just think that there's a lot of misconceptions out there. I don't want people to think, I mean, I'm one of 7 votes, period,
Yeah,
no matter what. And I think we've learned over the last few months that a lot of people don't realize that. So I'm really hesitant about that. Dr. Sorensen, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, but I'm not comfortable with that unless you added more.
Right, I agree. I would not put the chair in there. No.
Because I think people don't realize anyways, and I think that adding that into the policy, I think will just perpetuate that I'm a facilitator. I'm the same as all of you. I'm just the communicator and the facilitator, and I just don't want people to think that I'm the one making the policy.
Yeah, no, and I totally get that, and that's why I said I didn't know if that was the best way or what to do, but I did think that it was a lot of unilateral, like, carte blanche was given to.
I think it's the
superintendent.
opposite. I think if you just leave it as school committee, it would be better.
Yeah, so then we could add school committee at the end. So that's fine with me.
And I remember the specific one because we agonized over that word for a little while. I think we've tried a couple of different ones, but we can definitely, if anyone had any suggestions, I would be open to those. And I don't know if implement, I'm just reading it over again, is a better word for there.
Which one is it again?
4.2. Oh, Vedna.
Oh, Mrs. Haywood.
Yeah, I agree. So that was one of the, I mean, really in and looking at this policy initially, and I'll take your words for the slippery slope. There was a lot of carte blanche, so it surprised me, I think, from the MASC end of it. And so this 4.2 is something that we worked on for a little bit, you know. And just from a personal stance, I understand, you know, the little piece of the school committee shall authorize the superintendent to activate a back to school plan. And so in doing that, so thinking of last summer, and when there was a back to school plan that was implemented, we agreed on a back to school plan that the district or the school or the superintendent or created. It wasn't a plan that we created, they created it. So and we agreed upon it. So that was part of like some of that language, our verbiage. I mean, we can, you know, state that the school committee will vote or, you know, or in collaboration with the school committee, but it's still authorization in terms of the superintendent. There's still, I wouldn't say it's like extreme like latitude, but we're not necessarily creating the back to school plan per se. We're voting on it. So I don't know if anybody has any, you know, questions or statements to that. I mean, it could be worded differently.
Dr. Sorensen? Oh, sorry, go ahead, sorry, I didn't see.
Might it be as simple as saying an approved back to school plan? Because I think that,
yeah,
I understand what you're saying. Is that,
so authorize and approve, yeah.
That it's been,
Yeah.
somewhere in there's approval by the committee.
That makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, maybe it's literally one word adding in there.
Yeah, the point I was going to make, and I agree with what you just said, because we can't overstep our authority here. It is the job of the superintendent to bring the students back to school and recommend to us.
Yeah.
We should not be recommending to him.
No. Mrs. Savory? Miss Savory?
Yeah, and I agree 110% with what Dr. Sorensen is saying. And again, I think even in the last couple of weeks, this has just been, you know, made clear to us that, you know, that's not necessarily what people are thinking, that, you know, we are not the ones actually creating the plan. We don't know, you know, we can't go in and decide how the, you know, the periods run or the curriculum or what we're going to do, but we approve a recommended plan. So I think that's huge. And I think it's good that we're discussing it now.
Anything else? Anybody have any other questions, thoughts? Anybody want to make a motion?
You know, I do have one more question. I also do agree, because we do have an area in which 1.8 states the contact tracing protocol shall be established by the superintendent, and there is nothing that states in terms of testing. It just says contact tracing, which probably should go hand in hand. So I don't know if that's something that needs to be included, you know, in terms of testing protocol, and even you know, expanding that, you know, with the collaboration of public health as well. So that's something that could be added.
That's actually what made me think of it, is that mention of the contact tracing. It seems like it goes hand in hand. So.
I think it's a more general policy, so I think we're getting a little too specific if we put in testing criteria into the policy.
It gives room.
If the goal then is to be, I don't disagree with that, then I would then pull out things like the country. It seems like if you're going to have that level of detail, then it should be, you know, you should cover testing as well, or, you know, take that out so that it is generic. I'm fine with if the intention is for the policy to be generic.
I mean, and we could even do contact tracing and testing protocols as necessary, or, you know, because maybe not every pandemic will have that.
Correct.
And that way it gives the option. I mean, it's still generic, but it gives you that leeway. Anybody else have any thoughts? Do we want to think about this and get the edits back, or do we want to, anybody have a motion to approve? Ms. Savory?
I mean, we have a meeting next week, so we could approve it if it's not too late with the edits next week.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's minor.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Perfect, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Stacy, though, that's great.
All right, now we're moving on, and I don't know, Miss Savory, if you want to talk about the letter?
Sure. I guess it was timely today with the presentation with Miss White, but you know, a while ago, some parents reached out to me, and you know, I agreed, and I had decided that I was going to compose a letter about, you know, having some kind of equity with the arts students versus. And then I didn't even realize that Sandwich had made a resolution. Dr. Campbell, when I presented the idea of writing the letter, he let me know that Sandwich had been working on it as well. So I reached out to Dr. Gould, and she sent me the resolution that the Sandwich School Committee made. So with many edits, thank you to everybody that helped. We do have a letter that's presented today to reach out to the commissioner to look into bringing some equity back to the arts, like sports. So, you know, it was fine in the fall when it was warm out and the kids could sing outside. But as Ms. White explained, there are several districts and several states that are managing it. And, you know, I know that, you know, we talked a lot about mental illness today. We talked a lot about, you know, the kids feeling isolated. And I think, you know, a lot of these kids, the arts are what gets them through. And yes, Plymouth has been amazing with our arts program. And I know that the school committee has always supported the school committee. So I, you know, I'm presenting this letter in hopes that you will all vote to sign on to it. We can send it along with the resolution from the Sandwich School Committee to the commissioner, as well as our legislators, to try and get some equity in our arts, with our arts program. So that's pretty much it. And thank you everybody for your edits and your contributions. I know Ms. Badger and Mr. Bizzano helped as well as Ms. Grimes.
Dr. Sorensen?
I don't disapprove of the letter at all, and I'm going to tell you that my thoughts are racing here. What is going to be the next letter? You know, we're talking about athletics, and then we're talking about performing. We're talking about the arts. Have we not thought of the next letter? Maybe there is no next letter, but at some point.
Under new business, I was actually going to suggest, I've already started to compose a letter about the MCAS policy based on what MASC is working on. I don't know if that's what you were asking. You know, we did the letter, you know, last week. I mean, we do need to start advocating it. These are things that are not in our district's control. A lot of these things, it's stuff that we need to advocate for. And, you know I've met with our legislators several times. Being the legislative chair for MASC, I work on these policies, but I think with these things, we just need to start getting louder and start making our voices known. So I don't know if that's what you meant by what next letter, but that was the next letter I was thinking of.
Well, actually, I'm glad you said that. What I meant was, I'm not opposed to this idea. We do have to advocate. I totally understand that. But it seems like there's got to be a better way here than writing letters for each individual item that comes up. I don't know the answer to the problem, but I just bring that up.
If I might, Ms. Badger, add also that I know that our legislatives, Matt Moratori, Susan Moran, and Kathy Lenatra have all said that they'd be available to us at any time as well, and to come to another school committee. So we can, we can plead to them for, maybe we can get a hit list of all things that we really want them to help us with, or even give us a status. I think a lot of times we just like our constituents don't always know what goes on behind the scenes. I think sometimes we don't know what goes on behind the scenes as well. I am having a legislative committee meeting for MASC on the 6th. I think it's a week from Saturday. So hopefully we're going to come up with like a little toolkit for school committee members. That's one of our goals as to what they can do to advocate and what kind of issues we feel like we could make the most headway with. So that is something that I know we're getting off track here and I apologize, but I know that that's something that we want to do, is do some kind of a toolkit and let school committee members that might not be involved on that level know what we can do to advocate. That's one of our goals. And I know that our legislators will come and listen to us and listen to our plea anytime we invite them.
Dr. Sorensen?
When I brought up 2 meetings ago, the highest priority in my book is getting vaccinations down here for our teachers. If we're going to write letters, we should get vaccinations down here for our teachers, and we should advocate for that. I'm not saying these things aren't important, but we have huge priorities here. We have to triage
I
this
think
somewhat.
that's coming up later in the meeting today as well, I think,
All right, I've said what I wanted to say.
hopefully.
Anybody else have any comments
Thank
on
you.
the letter? Anybody? Okay. Do we need a motion?
Yeah, I'll motion.
Okay.
Motion that we send the letter to Commissioner Riley. I think version 2 is the latest version, is that correct?
I'll second it.
Second by Dr. Sorensen. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments, questions?
What was the motion?
To send the letter to
Commissioner
approve the
Riley.
letter to Commissioner. Yes, thank you. All right. Do we have any questions? No. Anybody? Okay. Ms. Savory,
Yes.
Ms. Haywood,
Yes.
Mrs. Burgess,
Yes.
Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Mr. Paisano,
Yes.
Dr. Sorensen.
Yes.
And Chair says yes, so, or acting chair, I guess. So unanimous. All right. Thanks, everybody, for that. All right, and now over to Chris, or Dr. Campbell, for our pandemic update.
Thank you very much, Mitch Badger. A lot of information to discuss and share this evening for sure. So this evening, I want to provide an update on the status of COVID cases in the district, as well as how our initial COVID surveillance testing has gone. And then I also want to address some developments that have taken place since our last school committee meeting on that Saturday, specifically around Department of Education's transportation regulations, which have been revised since we last met, and explain that in more detail. And we'll share some greater data in terms of how the last 21 weeks have looked in our district regarding COVID cases and quarantines and so forth. So as we did last December, you may recall that we typically will do a COVID report every Friday by 3 p.m. At December break, and again, this February break, we did a COVID update today for the period of our vacation. So February 13th through February 19th. So over the course of that week, the past week, we had 12 confirmed COVID diagnosis of students. Currently have 50 students that are quarantined, 3 confirmed staff, and 7 employees that are under quarantine. So our confirmed student cases and quarantines continue to be lower than they've been since December 11th. Staff numbers are their best that they've been since, I believe, December 4th. So it's very encouraging to see that trend, and I hope that trend continues next week as we come out of the vacation. I am going to share my screen right now. Mr. Shofi has been very helpful in sort of pulling together a lot of data regarding our staff and students over the last 21 weeks. So hopefully you can see that at home as well. And Mr. Shofi, can you see that okay?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's pretty small.
Right now on the top graph, we have looked at data since we returned to school, and what you're seeing represented on the far left is each of the buildings that we have operated. RA is Remote Academy, so we're tracking those students even though we anticipate no one's transmitted it in the virtual classroom. But as you go down to the totals, that's what we want to focus on, that bottom row. We've had 87 positive cases from our staff members. The next line over, in school transmissions, we've had 2 cases where teachers have tested positive from an exposure within the school. And that was due to one of our programs. We've talked about this several times before, that those programs, staff members, students are in close proximity. Every day they know they're coming into work. But we've only had 2 at this point in school. And then the 85 cases were outside. The next box deals with the quarantines, the exposure piece, the primary exposure. We've had 224 staff members that have, across each of the schools, that have been quarantined, 95 due to in-school exposure. What you're seeing highlighted in yellow at each of those schools, and I know you'd have to toggle back and forth, but those yellows indicate the schools that have a program, a special needs program, that is going to really require our staff members to be in close proximity. And in those cases, when we had a positive test come in, we had to put out quite a few staff members and students, when you see that on the bottom chart. And then 129 were due to an outside exposure. Majority are within the home from a spouse or a child. So what you're seeing in the very last column is just an impact of COVID-19, whether they're positive tested or quarantined. There's 311 times. We have had some staff members that have quarantined multiple times, just because of cases that have presented themselves to their immediate family. But that's not the norm, but there are certainly some cases like that. So that's kind of our staff breakdown for us since the beginning of the school year. The next group of data is the exact same information, however, it is with students. And so the number of positive cases for students since the beginning of the year is 329. We have not had any reported in-school transmissions that tested positive. So there's kind of really just 2 columns there. The quarantines seem large. 1,477 students have been quarantined. Again, we've had 93 within the schools. The yellow indicates the program, so when a student has tested positive, we've had to put out the entire program. And then outside is where the bulk of the quarantines are impacted. And sometimes it could be a family. If one of the parents tests positive and they have 4 children in the household, all 4 of those students are quarantined as well. And then total impact, we've had over 1,800 students that had some contact, whether it's through their positive test of their own or if they were quarantined due to a primary exposure. And when I look at the total data, it's about 6% of our staff have tested positive, and then a little over 4.5% of our student population had tested positive at one time. We have not had multiple positives from any individual, but we have had, at times, individuals quarantined on more than one occasion. So we wanted to just kind of break down. I know on our dashboard, we weren't going to get specific with schools each week because of identification purposes. But when you look at a 21-week span, the numbers allow us to be able to share a global picture of what we've dealt with since the start of the school year. And I know it's hard going back and forth as you're looking at it on the screen, but if anybody has any questions, we'd be glad to answer them as best as we can.
Anybody have any questions?
Just repeat the number. It was 6% of staff?
Staff.
And what was the number of students?
4.5% for students.
4.5%, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? No? All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Shofi. Another thing that I'd like to give an update on is the COVID surveillance testing. So as you know, prior to the February break, we were going back and forth about 2 different options. Going back in December, COVID pool testing became an option that the Department of Education was providing to districts after much discussion and review and feedback from many people. We felt that it was too cumbersome and for our nurses particularly, but also weren't really comfortable with the fact that the follow-up testing was a rapid antigen test. So we've been all along, we've been pursuing other options as well. So as you know, we've administered an optional saliva-based PCR test, which is for each individual. We had a number of people that expressed interest, staff and students. We actually passed out approximately 500 kits prior to the February break, as well as there were 3 date options during the February break to receive a kit if a family member was interested. As of this afternoon, we had approximately 283 tests that had been completely processed, and that means that those tests had not only been received by the lab, but they've been processed in terms of the test results themselves. We had nearly 300 staff take tests and 152 families, or about 198, just shy of 200 individual students. So of those total 500 tests, again, 283 had been received as of this afternoon and processed, with additionals that are still being processed and some that have yet to be received. We don't know if they've actually been delivered, if the individuals chose not to actually take the test, but that's what we have so far with that. But of the 283 tests that came back, we have 1 staff member test that came back positive and 1 student, and the rest came back with no positive results. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Mr. Chauvin.
No, we have about 70 test kits that have been received by the lab that are being processed. So it is certainly our hope, and I just checked it 10 minutes ago to see if there was any updates. My hope is by tomorrow we have another large group that we're able to review. And there was probably a little over 120 tests that we're unsure if the staff members or the families that picked them up actually utilized them. I know a couple families have already contacted schools and they had changed their travel plans, so they returned them. And so, you know, you're going to have some of that blended in there. But my hope is within the next day or two, we'll have the other bulk of the ones that were submitted while on break to get us an idea on the surveillance testing.
Okay, any questions about that?
Can you repeat the rough breakdown of the 500, which part was students versus teachers?
Sure, 300, approximately 300 for staff and the rest for students. We have about 152 families that expressed interest, registered for the tests, which comprise approximately 200 individual students, and 283 have been returned and processed to date.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the 200 seems shockingly low given that we have over 7,000 students, so.
Yes, and when we initially put the survey out for interest, gosh, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we had 90% of our staff that completed the survey expressed interest in participating, and 76% of families expressed interest, about 500 families, I think, of the total that participated in that individual survey. So we had 1,300 that expressed interest in between staff and families that expressed interest in participating in this testing. And again, we don't know why they chose not to. It could be because they knew they weren't leaving their home for a number of reasons. But we certainly have many kits available, and we will continue to discuss how we roll out surveillance testing here in the district. But we certainly have that option because we went forward and purchased 2,500. So we have at least 2,000 on hand right now.
Dr. Sorensen?
I would say that that's, we have 2 positives as a result of the testing kits from last week. That's actually excellent. That, of course, if we didn't test, those 2 people would have come back to school, and they could have been 4 or 8 in a week. So that's really good. We caught 2, and maybe we'll catch more when you get the data in. But there was one other thing I want to say about that. When we came back from the holiday break, from the Christmas break,
yes.
And we know we have 2 today coming back from February break. How does that compare to the Christmas? Did we know the number when they came back from Christmas? Because we had to close North for a week.
In terms of, these are asymptomatic individuals. We have 12 students that confirmed positive that were symptomatic and tested independently. So that we know. How does that compare to prior to the break? Last break we had a spike, but it was due to an event, a gathering at a particular school that really threw our numbers off. that break. So it's hard to really separate that out.
Yeah, okay, so we don't know, when they came back after Christmas, we don't know how many students were positive.
That's correct, 'cause, in this case, both were asymptomatic, and if we
Yeah.
didn't have the surveillance kit, they would have walked our halls,
Okay.
as they would have every other day.
Well, either way, I mean, it's great that we caught 2.
Correct.
You know.
I agree.
Anybody else? No?
Okay.
Continue.
Very good, thank you. All right, so since we last met, so this is our first meeting since we met 2 Saturdays ago. And the letter was sent out regarding our return to school goal of April 26th. There is one update that has been discussed this evening, which I just want to reiterate and go through some of the details of, and that's specifically the Department of Education's transportation guidance. So the Department of Education developed their fall transportation guidance in July, and at that time it was in collaboration with infectious disease physicians, public health experts, I believe Massachusetts General Brigham Health Systems, as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics. So there's a lot of experts that are at the table when this guidance is being initially rolled out. They're not doing it in isolation at the department for sure. So at that time, as you know, the guidance was no more than 23 students on a bus. So we're really maximizing distance on buses and keeping the windows down. So this guidance, as we know, was updated as of February 11th. So literally Thursday of the week before vacation. So a few days after we met at our retreat, with the focus on the physical distancing requirements based on the availability of additional data from their experts and the researchers that were doing that. So in addition, the Massachusetts chapter of American Academy of Pediatrics reviewed and endorsed this guidance. So the new guidance has been endorsed by the American Academy of Pediatrics. So revisions to this guidance is based on data really looking at air exchange. And I actually had an opportunity to see research that was done back in November or December by researchers out of the public health department at Harvard University, and they were looking at the air exchange on buses. And they specifically did 2 controlled studies, one with the windows up using the ventilation and one with the windows down a couple inches. And they're looking at air exchange because we know how important air exchange is to the quality of, the likelihood of transmission of the virus. So the revisions to that guidance again was based on that study where they found that 21 to 43 air exchanges per hour were being made on any given bus, which is significantly higher than what would be considered acceptable. And again, that's because that air is rushing through those buses, again, with the windows down. So that guidance has been revised. It is differentiated between elementary school and middle school slightly, based on continued evidence that younger students are less likely to become infected and may be less likely to transmit COVID-19. So this is all from the department's research with the individuals and experts that I mentioned. So as of February, physical distancing guidelines on buses have been updated. So at the elementary schools, capacity limitations in physical distancing has been lifted entirely. Middle school and high school, capacity limitation and physical distancing requirements for students on buses are lifted except for middle and high schools in districts with high community prevalence. For middle school and high schools in districts with high community prevalence, the capacity limitation and the distancing requirements on buses are amended to allow 2 students per bench. So there is definitely an increase. It's actually you're increasing it significantly, but that is a revision or an amendment that would be made in the event a district is a high prevalence district. So in terms of ventilation, windows need to be kept open at all times, at least 2 inches, and in adverse weather conditions, every other window can be opened. And then in terms of seat assignments, it is particularly important that students should be assigned to a single bus and a particular seat. So this is all revisions to that guidance. So if there are any questions regarding that, I'd be happy to take them before moving on to the next piece.
Nope.
No, okay.
Go ahead.
We've had a lot of discussion about vaccinations. I think one thing that we all agree on that we've tried very hard to advocate for the early administration of vaccines for our educators. I know that this board has, the Massachusetts Association for School Superintendents has, to the governor, and it's something that's been very important to us. And as you know, we've been looking to find a way to provide a more local option for vaccines for our staff, and we've expressed our commitment to open our facilities, and I know that we have many of our nurses that would help with anything should the opportunity arise. As many people know, at the beginning of the vaccine rollout, our local public health offices were receiving vaccines. So with phase 1, with our first responders, the fire, the police, and our school nurses, our public health director was receiving vaccines locally, and that administration was happening locally. Well, things have changed and been revised recently where that isn't happening now. So our public health director is not receiving the vaccines the way that she was before, and the state has really placed a greater emphasis on these super sites, Gillette, Fenway, and these larger sites, really maximizing those sites as much as possible, and aren't providing the vaccines to the public health directors for distribution. So this is frustrating for us, as a school department. As I've mentioned before, we've had great conversations in the past with Brewster Ambulance. Brewster Ambulance has been a great support for our first responders and rollout of phase 1. They've been a great supporter of the rollout, and they are looking to get approved as a super site distributor. I had an opportunity to have some conversations this weekend. I also had a meeting, a conference call this morning with members of Brewster Ambulance. I have committed to making our district the physical location for the super site opportunity. Brewster feels very confident that they can get approved in the near future. Our goal would be to use Plymouth North High School as the site. We would roll this out in 3 days, a Thursday, Friday, and a Saturday. Opening up after school hours, Thursday, Friday, really expanding it on Saturday. And my conversations were very encouraging with our partners at Brewster, specifically about their ability. They feel very confident in getting approved. So I'm hopeful of that. And we will have regular meetings and updates regarding this. And I asked the question, like, how quickly do you think that this could happen? When do you anticipate that this may be a possibility? And the folks at Brewster felt that we start about approximately 3 weeks from the beginning of phase 2 to the second step of phase 2, from 75-year-olds to the 65-year-old population. If that continues to be the pattern, which it could be, but even if you add a week to that, we're looking at approximately 3 weeks from now, that may be when it opens up to the next phase, which is encouraging. Brewster feels very confident that they can get approved prior to that rollout, and we would be ready and able to support that rollout immediately. So that's very encouraging, and I just wanted to share that with all of you. And certainly as I receive more information and have conversations with Brewster, I will share them with this committee, but that was probably the most encouraging news that I had today regarding that, and very optimistic. So we'll continue that conversation.
Isn't the supply, the biggest problem is the supply.
The supply is, but and the supply is really being prioritized for these super sites.
The entire country is having a
Sure.
problem with
Yep.
supply, yeah.
Yep. So Brewster feels very confident once they're approved, if they're approved as a super site and they get that vaccine, once they get that vaccine as a super site, we could immediately start with the rollout of the vaccine administration.
And they think they can be a super site for just 3 days? Or are we saying like a super site rollout for every Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the remainder?
They said that we could get it done within 3 days. We also talked about opening up to other school communities,
Okay.
like Silver Lake, Duxbury, Carver, Rising Tide, and also having an opportunity to support if there's any extra vaccine, depending on how much they receive. I think it depends on how much they receive. Depending on how much they receive and how many vaccines are actually distributed, once we go through that, we could also, I mean, we know that there are 65-year-olds in the community, 75-year-olds that still haven't received that. I was having conversations with our director of the Council on Aging on how we could get creative too, and then this came up. So I think we would certainly be able to support Brewster not only with our staff, but also the community at large as well.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Sorensen?
You don't have to get into this tonight, but I'm hoping that, you know, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but maybe we should. I'm hoping that we're going to have some vehicle by which people can sign up for appointments. Our staff can sign up for appointments based on certain criteria. Otherwise, you're going to be swamped, you know, with 700 people wanting a vaccine on Friday afternoon.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Sorensen. It's really important. If we can control the way that is administered, that's really important to us. We certainly want to make sure that we're doing that in the most effective way. I think we also want to keep in mind, knowing some of the potential side effects that some people may receive with that second dose. We want to be very mindful that we're not vaccinating an entire school, an entire grade level in one school. Really trying to maximize the coordination of those efforts over the course of those days so that it helps in any way that we can, but we certainly will be, I'm sure that will be part of our coordination efforts.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Ms. Savory?
I want to make something really clear too. And I know Mr. Ferran was very quick in pointing out that I was shaking my head. And what I was shaking my head to was his statement that Mr. Pinto had said that he was going to require that every teacher was vaccinated, when in fact what he said was, and this is why I was shaking my head, is that he wanted to make sure that they were available for teachers. And I think in several of the letters that we received, people thought that we were also saying every teacher had to be vaccinated. Well, we all know that we can't force them to be vaccinated, but what we did say in that letter is once vaccinations are available for teachers. So I think there's a lot of I think there's some confusion about that too. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that that's what they meant. And that's exactly what Tom said. He did not say that they had to have it. They had to have it available to them, which, again, hopefully a lot of them will get it, but it just needs, we can't force them to do it. So.
Yeah, I've got a few comments.
Mrs. Burgess? Go ahead.
I had a few comments and questions. One, it was pretty clear during the public comment section, there's definitely an impression out there with the portion of the community that we could return immediately if this committee were just to decide so that, we're the barrier here, we just got to vote on it. But realistically, how quickly could you even mobilize and put a plan together to get us back in school, even if every one of us said today, let's go back to school tomorrow?
Thank you, and I'm happy to address all that. And I think one thing, just to sort of, if I may for one moment, I think there's very little of what was said in public comment that I disagree with. I think that this has taken a toll on everyone. I think we've talked about the mental health of our kids. We've talked about our academic concerns. We've talked about the concerns we have for our staff. And we realize that the great toll this has taken on families. I mean, I have 5 nieces and nephews in this district, 2 children of my own. I see it personally. This is I don't think anything's easy in a pandemic, and it's certainly not something that we take lightly. So I think a return to school is always on our minds. It's certainly always on my mind. But in terms of the logistics, Mr. Pisano, that you mentioned, first of all, I just want to say that the freezer issue would not be an issue for us. I can talk to Mr. Van Cott about that comment that was made this evening. But there are some logistics that we need to go through. So particularly physically moving desks into classrooms. So that this is with a district as large as ours, with over 7,100 students, our schools, primarily at the elementary level, prior to COVID, did not have a lot of desks. A lot of instruction is done with what are called cauliflower tables, kidney tables, small group tables where a lot of collaborative work was done. We've purchased over 1,500 desks when we found out what the state was coming down with. This was in late June that we started making these orders. So consequently, it may seem like an easy thing to solve, but when you go into 7 out of 8 of our elementary schools right now, there is a lot of furniture in those cafeterias because we can't possibly store that. There isn't a facility for us to reasonably store that would guarantee that we wouldn't get damaged because of weather. And we knew that we didn't need the space in the cafeterias because of the way that we were introducing the model. So we've been maximizing the space of our cafeterias. Again, 7 out of 8 of our elementary schools. So first and foremost, we would need to start physically moving desks into classrooms. And one thing, and I mentioned this, we had a faculty meeting, an optional meeting with our faculty, I did this afternoon, to talk about some of these things. I think regardless of where that sort of our goal is with return, these are things that we should start looking at now. So I would recommend, and I will recommend this to our administrators, that we start physically moving desks into classrooms. Not because we're going to go back tomorrow, because that is not reasonable to do something like that. You can't change a plan that quickly. But in order to see and properly assess the composition of those classrooms with the current class sizes and course sections. So we've had a lot of changing and shifting since we did what's called this pressure test. So back in the summer, the Department of Education said, please conduct a pressure test. Look at all of your classrooms across all of your schools and how many students can you fit in 3 feet versus 6 feet. And at the time, we determined then that we could go back, certainly at 6 feet in a hybrid model, but not with all students. And we presented that here in August, on August 3rd. But at 3 feet.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I think what you're covering is really important. Yep. And apparently we've cut out on the Verizon channels. Oh. And I just...
Lost feed.
Sorry. It's just very important, and I just want to make sure that people hear it. Verizon 45
message. Someone just said we got bumped for PCIS Student of the Month.
Mr. Palladino.
Right.
YouTube.
The YouTube one's still working?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. All right, then we can continue. Sorry, I just want to
That's
make
okay.
sure that people were seeing your important comments.
Can you remind me where you left off with the desks?
Desks, yes, sorry.
Yes, so right now, my recommendation to our administrators is, because we did the pressure test in the summer, and we realized that we could go back at 3 feet, but we couldn't go back at 6 feet in all classrooms. We knew that. We knew that there were some classrooms back, specifically one at Cold Spring, and there may have been one at Nathaniel Morton, that would even struggle at 3 feet, given the number of children in those classrooms. But we had a plan for that. So my recommendation regarding that first logistics, Mr. Pisano, is to actually physically start moving furniture into classrooms to set them up so we know, based on each classroom at the elementary level, at the middle school, and according to the sections at the high school, now that we're in second semester, courses have been adjusted, students make changes to their schedules, so we need to look at each and every classroom and physically start setting them up so we know exactly what we're dealing with now, because it's different than what it was in the summer. All right, and that will take some time, but we can start that immediately. So that's a recommendation that I have for our administrators. We potentially may need to move additional furniture into the cafeteria, but we can try to figure that out, because some of our classrooms, particularly at the elementary level, have been able to maintain some of their furniture and teacher resources because they didn't have to go to 3 feet. They had more space to deal with. So this is why it's really important that we put that furniture back in, those desks back in, so we can really assess to what degree is this an issue, if at all, and what's the distance that we have, what can we maximize in each and every classroom. And then there are other logistics. Lunches, we need to have some conversations on how we will schedule lunches with all the students back. Staffing was mentioned this evening regarding lunches. We would certainly work with Mr. Patrick Vancott, our food service director, regarding that. If we needed additional staff, we would just make that happen. That will not be something that will be a barrier for us. As I already said, our high school sections, we need to look at capacities regarding the second semester courses. We also, I feel, should assess if any of our students would return from a remote. So this is another thing we need to know. Now, if this is the direction that we're moving in, we need to know there may be some families that say, oh, now that they're going back full time, I would like my child to go back. So if that's the case, I think we really need to know what numbers we're dealing with and how significant that would be, because those are adjustments we would have to make as well. Another piece which I know we talked about music today, but instrumental, there are different guidelines for instrumental indoors. So we need to look at those sections and see what that does in terms of instruction and the capacity for teaching inside. And those are, in terms of the specific logistics, those are the ones that come immediately to mind. I think one thing that I also want people to understand is, should we reach this goal, whenever this goal would be met, that with any student cases that arise with the full return, because we're at 6 feet now, we are quarantining fewer students on a regular basis because they're not considered close contact. Once we go closer, we have to understand that we could potentially be quarantining students more frequently. So for example, if I'm in a classroom with at 3 feet apart, and I have a student in front of me, to my left and right, and behind me, and I am COVID positive, the individuals around me are considered close contact now and would have to be quarantined. That hasn't changed according to the Department of Education and CDC guidance. So that's something that we would have to take into consideration as well, which could be disruptive to students.
So going back implies or requires going back down to 3 feet?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Going back requires going down to 3 feet?
Yes. Well, in most cases, between 3 and 6.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, 'cause it was 3 feet.
May I follow up
Dr.
with
Sorensen.
a curriculum question?
Yes.
You know, I'm teaching algebra, and somebody moves into the district, and I find out that they're not where my class is. So I have to meet with that individual and try to catch them up to where my class is because they came from another district. My hunch is there's going to be a lot of kids coming back from remote and or hybrid who are not where they should be. Teachers are going to have a really hard time because it's not going to be 1 or 2 students. They may have 6 or 7 students that are not where they should be at that time. I don't know how they're going to manage that.
I think we have a lot of students that are there
Mr.
now.
Morgan?
I'm sorry?
Hybrid. I think we have a lot of students that are now in hybrid aren't where they're supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's everyone makes a very good point. I think, as we said, I don't think there's much that we really disagreed with some of the comments made this evening. I think our teachers are doing a remarkable job in the hybrid model, really trying to maximize the amount of differentiation they can give on a given day because of the small numbers. But it's certainly, I think, and we will present we'll present data at a very future meeting regarding how students are doing. But there are a lot of students that are having a hard time academically with this, no question.
So some of the things we've talked about with our coordinators is implementing an intervention block at the elementary level, so that students can sort of backtrack so that they can get some of what they missed. We're also talking about an expansive summer school program for our students, not just for special education students or Title I students, but any student who has found themselves behind.
Any other questions on this? I know you have more to share, right? Did you have more?
That,
Is that it?
specific to COVID?
Yes.
That's specific to my COVID
Okay,
update.
perfect. Anybody have any questions?
But those are really, I'm sorry, Ms. Badger, those
go
are
ahead,
really
Dr. Campbell.
the conditions, I think, move, like, immediately. We do know that there are districts around us that are returning.
Yes.
And I think we can look at that and see how things are going. We also know that we're currently one of 63 communities that are still in the red in terms of prevalence. Hopefully that will go down. The information that I shared tonight is encouraging, and I hope that goes down. But we do have some legitimate logistical issues. Transportation has been a significant barrier, and I've said to multiple people, many that were on the call today, that would be a deal breaker this year if that wasn't revised. So that was very hopeful, particularly where the evidence and the research that the state's done is supporting that. But I think in the coming week or two right now, we really need to work on ironing out those logistics and getting the classrooms physically set up to really do a proper assessment of what we're dealing with in the physical environments. And it's not as, it may sound like an easy task, but with over 7,000 students in 13 buildings, while trying to continue to clean them and maintain them, there's only so much manpower that can go around to do that, and it will take some time to do that. It will take some time.
I know I had a couple of questions as well. One of my things is I think it's important to remember that, and Dr. Sorensen brought it up as well, that the students are remote, can stay remote. They do
Correct.
not have to come
Yes,
in.
and
Just
we've
to clarify, because I know
communicated-
last time
We've communicated, thank you. We've communicated to all the families about that and reiterated it. I think that after reflecting on the letter that we sent out, it wasn't entirely clear, but we have communicated that that will be an option for the duration of this year.
Yep.
I don't know what the state is going to require of districts next year, but I can assure any family that has their child that is remote this year that will continue through the end of this year.
And I know obviously it's long-term. We need to think about September. We need to think about today, getting our students back in the classroom. But I think that we do need to think about those students who are remote and that need to be remote for a reason. I know we've received letters from multiple families who, their child is immunocompromised and needs to do that. So I do hope that, if it comes to the point that we need to write another letter or we need to talk to our legislative group, that we do that, because I really think it's important that we make sure that these students who need it get it, and whether or not it's provided by the state or we have to figure something out again this year, or coming up next year.
Yeah, so I sort of piggyback on that, Ms. Badger. I think there's a number of things. We certainly are going to have a return to school plan for next year, and it will be different, hopefully in many ways, than this year. Having said that, I know that recovery and monitoring of student progress and academic support and enrichment, I think, needs to be a part of that, because there's a lot of that, a lot of that has been missing. I do imagine, I haven't heard this for certain, but the commissioners have sort of suggested that there may not be the same scope of requirement for remote options next year, but it probably will be a requirement of districts. I imagine it will be for students that have compromised immune systems and other health issues. I can't say that for certain, but I would imagine that that's what will come down from the state.
Yeah, there's going to be somebody.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, Ms. Savory.
I have a couple of things. I know one thing about, again, getting back to the letter that we sent out and how I feel like it was misinterpreted with some things. I know a lot of people talked about, I think it was Dr. Sorensen that brought up, doing the outdoor classes. And a lot of people were thinking that it meant only if we could do outdoor classes. And we all know that we live in New England, and we all know that that's, we can't guarantee that. But I think that we've been hearing that, they want us to think outside the box. They want us to think creative. And I think that we're going to continue to think of ideas like this in order to make this happen. Like Mr. Murphy said, do more outdoor, field trips and things like that. So I wanted to let everybody know that we do know that we live in New England and we can't go outside every day. But the other thing is we could possibly have some students that think that it's going to be too close for them that are going to pull their kids out of hybrid and go remote. I know there was a comment about this is the majority want to go back, but we don't know that because we all have gotten letters from both sides. So, there could be parents that don't think that they want their kids to go back full time and might choose all remote. So we've got to consider that. Also, maybe we discussed a little bit about, and I don't know if Dr. Campbell, you're prepared to talk about this at all now, but like a tiered approach, bringing some of the younger kids in, or do you have anything to add about that right now? And then I have one more question afterwards.
Sure. I'm happy to comment on that, Ms. Avery. I think that some of the districts that have been referenced or have suggested a return have not done full districts in our area. There are some that have done elementary. I am aware that there are also some that have started a tiered approach to that, working initially with lower elementary, primary grades, and then moving it up a week or so later with additional grades. So that's certainly always an option that could be considered.
Okay. And then the last thing is that you had mentioned a few minutes ago about going through all the logistics that Mr. Pisano had asked about, that it would take, I think you said a little bit of time to get all that down once we start moving things around. So what are we looking at as far as, do you want to get that together for us and then we can kind of look and see if that's something that we can move that date up? And again, that date in that letter was just if certain things happen, it wasn't necessarily that we were going to do it then. We could have done it sooner, we could have done it later, but is it something that we can reevaluate if you need to get that? Is it going to take a couple of weeks for us to look at that and reevaluate it again? Or are you thinking now, or we've got a meeting next week, or the meeting after that? I'm just curious as to what you're thinking, because when you said it would take a week or two to plan all that.
To physically pull that off, Ms. Avery, I think it would. We have a meeting with our administrators this Friday, which this is a big focus of us, is really looking at the initial goal of the district to return students and what that will take logistically. Really need to have the collective input, particularly of our principals, food service coordinator, director of facilities, and we'll all be in the same room. We have a meeting set up for the end of this week. This will be the focus of our meeting, to go through those logistics, exactly how long it will take. As I said to our staff today during our faculty meeting, that I will be recommending that classrooms get set up sooner than later, not because I'm suggesting they go back tomorrow, but we need to evaluate the space and set it up. Some of our teachers have had all the desks set up in classrooms with half as many students, giving each student an individual desk, and some chose not to. I think we need to set all the classrooms up. Certainly, I would speak to Ms. Renaud about the logistics, if we need, how much time it will take for our staff to help move that furniture. But I certainly could give an update to that next Monday, regarding that plan. And I do think it's something that we may want to get more periodic updates on. I know we typically meet every other week, but certainly if, and maybe we make that decision next week based on the information, but I certainly can get a recommendation or a procedural, like what our tasks would be in order to do that with our administrative team for next week.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Before we continue, because we're clearly going to go past 10:30, I need a motion to go past 10:30. Yes, please. Mrs. Burgess? Mrs. Burgess, were you making the motion?
Yeah, I did.
Perfect. So we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All right. Any questions on the motion? All right, Miss Avery,
Yes.
Mrs. Haywood,
Yes.
Mrs. Burgess,
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
I'm on the fence here. I guess I'll say yes.
Mr. Pisano.
Yes.
Dr. Sorensen.
Reluctantly, yes.
Yes, and I vote yes as well. So unanimous. You can continue. Now, Mrs. Burgess, you had a question. Sorry.
No, well, I wanted to say it when she was saying it because it was a part of the thing, but it's kind of weird to bring it up now.
Go ahead.
But it was about, do we have a way to tell, like, I see on social media and stuff that people who've never done it before have liked homeschooling. There are some who do. But there's a lot more that don't, but whatever, there are. But is there a way that before that we can identify that? Can we do some kind of a survey or something to see how many are not coming back?
Well, I think one thing, Mrs. Burgess, that may be important, I think we want to be careful about what kind of surveys we do, so we don't give people a false impression
Yeah.
of what that survey is for. But certainly, in the event that we were to return 100%, I think it is important to survey our homeschool families, as well as those that have chosen remote, to see if they would choose to return. So I think that's important information,
hard to
because
word it, but-
we have 100 additional homeschool families this year, as you know, and we have approximately 400 elementary students and over 200 secondary students that are remote. And of those, we may have some that
Yeah, so it
come
would
back.
be the
It may
ones that are
not have a
remote, yeah.
profound effect, but it could affect a particular classroom, which we would need to plan for.
Yeah.
So we could certainly
So it would be
survey.
only those, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other questions from
Okay.
anybody?
I had
Yep,
We just
Mr.
need to
Bazzano.
have plans, that's all.
Go ahead.
I'm probably more of a comment to follow up on what Ms. Savory was talking about, looking at a tiered or phased approach. One of the things that really jumped out at me during the public comments is certainly, I think the families that are probably having the toughest time are certainly those with, working families with younger children. I completely can understand that. So I would certainly encourage you to look at not only just tiered approach, but even just plain old, if it's only more possible for the elementary schools, it's worth considering, whether or not we go back, put in a plan that only looks at elementary schools versus the middle school and high schools. Because certainly, as the kids get older, there probably is a little more ability for, the high school kids aren't necessarily being homeschooled, like, the smaller kids are and require the attention. So I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying it might be worth looking at.
Mr. Morgan?
I'm totally opposed to that. I mean, I know several, my son and other people, I talk to their children in the high school, middle school level are struggling with this, with the remote. And I mean, I don't mind the tiered, but I don't do, I don't really think that's fair to them at all.
I don't agree. My kids want to be back in school as well. I'm saying, I think it's worth looking at all the options.
Yeah.
I'd rather, if that was the only way, I'd rather have that than have it be all or nothing. If
Yeah,
the
I
option is
understand.
nothing. That's what I'm proposing. So, yeah, I'm saying I think we should look at what the, different pathways.
Miss Avery.
No, I agree. And the reason why I brought it up is I know we've talked about it in the past, but also I talked to a girl from Marshfield today that's in high school. And I said, oh, I heard you guys went back full time. She's like, well, not the high school yet. The high school's not going back until April. So, again, that proves that, when we think other districts went back full time, there usually are details that make it so that you can't compare them to us. But I know that Marshfield, the high school, is going back later than the elementary schools, I think, went back today. So that's why I brought it up, because I know that we had talked about it in the past, just as an option to talk about.
Yeah, that's
I'm
correct.
not saying
Most
one's more
districts
than,
that have
one's better than the
initiated-
other. I just wanted to put it out there.
Most districts that have initiated a return to school have started a phased approach with their either the elementary first or primary elementary, upper elementary, and then, but there are some districts, Hanover, for example, we know, has gone back, or proposed to go back full-time.
Anybody else have any questions? Any other comments, thoughts?
One.
Yep, go right
Sorry.
Nope.
It's an important topic.
No, it really is.
If you're not ready to talk about this, that's fine. It's probably part of your whole planning approach, but do you foresee any potential impacts to either schedules, teacher assignments, all that? Because I think that's an important piece for parents to understand. Are you okay going back if your kid has a completely different schedule or a different set of teachers, that kind of thing? And maybe you still have to figure it out, but is that even a possibility?
So I'm going to make sure I understand the question, particularly for secondary students.
For anybody.
Return at the elementary level is much easier, certainly, than the secondary level. I think what we've seen, we've always had students but having said that, we've always had students that have entered our district at different times at the high school as well. They can move from out of state. They've taken a different sequence of courses. It's always easier at certain points in the year, particularly at the high school, to transition students in to courses. It's not impossible. It's more challenging, though. It's much easier at the elementary level to transition students in. But this is something that if we have students that are in TECA or Ingenuity currently at the secondary level, we would work with those families if they chose to return those students and try to match them up. We can't deny them that opportunity. It would be difficult, I would have to say. It would be extremely difficult and maybe impossible for families to choose to move in the other direction at such a late point in the year. We can't guarantee at the secondary level the remote options that we provide. We contract with those organizations, so they're approved virtual high schools, particularly TECA and our Ingenuity program. Those courses, there's registration points and deadlines for those, much like virtual high school would have. So it would be very difficult to leave and go remote, particularly at April 26th, with such a short period of time left. So I don't even know if that would be a possibility.
Yeah, I was looking more just even the students that are in plain old hybrid, just those kids who went from hybrid to full-time, would they be impacted at all? Does anything change that, or is it as simple as right now there's
No,
kids are going Tuesday, Thursday, and Monday, Wednesday, they're just going to all of a sudden be.
Yeah, I think what we will do is look at those individual sections, particularly at the high school. Some of our elective courses may be really large, and there may be something that we would have to adjust, but that's something that we would need to look at. And I had conversations with one of our principals during the break specifically about that, and they're running sections now to look at that. So there may be some adjustments that would need to be made, but I don't have a definitive answer as to how significant that would be.
Okay.
Plus, he talked about looking at the classroom size and space when you put desks in there at the younger levels.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we had a teacher who was managing 25 or 26 students right now and they could only get 24 desks in a classroom, we'd have to look at additional spacing.
Yeah, that's where I was going to.
Yeah,
So all of a sudden you're doubling the capacity, the volume of students in there.
So that's that pressure testing that we would be
Yeah.
working with the principals to see what the logistics would look like, and then hopefully minimize any move or have to look at moving classrooms, as he had mentioned before. So that's what I'm thinking you were going with.
So really, I mean, the full answer is you basically need to analyze it and figure it out. So it's.
Yes,
sir.
I can say based on, at the elementary level, based on our full enrollment numbers in the summer, assuming that all students were coming back, we had very few concerns with capacity. I think we had 2 classrooms that we were concerned with. So knowing that not all of those students came back, I don't imagine that will be a significant challenge for us. The secondary piece, particularly some of these electives, may be a challenge.
Any other questions, thoughts? Anybody? I have.
Question, is it possible to hold the next agenda item off till next Monday?
That's what I'm gonna get to, but I have one more question before we get there. Sorry. My question is, and I had a couple of parents ask about, will we allow the Y into the schools for after-school program? Because I know the Y is currently, has some students who are there on their days off or not off, but their days out of in-person school.
Yeah, I actually met with the Y over February break, so to start to talk about what it would look like, either for morning care and for afternoon care. They were, concerned about physical space, so typically their programs are either in the cafeteria or in the gym. So we would have to look at how many kids are in those programs now, how many kids would need to access those programs if we did come back on a full-time basis, and is there other additional spaces? Could they do a couple additional, annex kind of classrooms off of the cafeteria, for an example. So that would be part of the pressure testing that we would have to look at as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts on this COVID subject? No. Perfect. Wonderful.
So, sorry, Ms. Badger, so
Yep.
next Monday, on the 1st, at our next meeting, I will give an update regarding all of the logistics administrative practices and sort of a timeline of what those issues would take in order to resolve, if those were the only issues that we were looking at.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So, Dr. Sorensen?
I'm sorry?
Go back to your.
Well, I was asking
yep.
the chair if it's possible to hold off the superintendent's mid-cycle update until next Monday.
Perfect.
I think
yeah.
we're already doing that, right?
That's what I was going to say after, but I
Is
just.
that going to be a lengthy thing, your superintendent's goals? Or should we?
Yeah, it's
make
little.
a
I think
motion to put it off till
it's
next
fine to
week?
put on next Monday.
Yeah,
I think we
okay.
should have-
I'll move that we put it off till next Monday.
I'm prepared to talk about it whenever you want to.
Second. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions, thoughts on the motion? No, wonderful. Okay. Ms. Avery?
Yes.
Mrs. Haywood?
Yes.
Mrs. Burgess?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Pisano?
Yes.
Dr.
He's
Sorensen?
gonna say no.
And yes to me as well. Okay. Perfect.
It's so
All
late
right.
then.
So then that brings us, so we can, are we skipping, we don't need the MCAS
Yeah, did we
update?
skip MCAS?
Sorry. So,
Well, we can, it shouldn't be any new or old, you can try that.
Good.
Reports, should
We
we
can
do
talk about it next
reports
time.
quick?
in the plan, reports and proposal from committee members. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share?
I do on the building committee.
Well, that'll come. Anybody have any reports and proposals?
One.
Ms. Savory?
I have one. Just that the DVC met, the Distinguished Visitors Committee met last week, and we haven't really met since COVID. And we just did a quick update twice. I don't have the dates, but in the last couple of months, we had 2 Zoom meetings with Shichigahama. The first one was town officials and chaperones that had gone over, and we met with them. It was great. And the other one that we had was with students. So students that had gone over met with the students. They played a scavenger hunt game. It was a lot of fun. They interacted. They tried to play an online video game too. But one thing that we wanted to do, and this is a reason why I didn't wait till next week to talk about this, is they sent over a video to us, which I think that the chair of the Distinguished Visitors Committee thought that we've all seen. And I don't believe it was distributed. I think it was sent over for the 400 specifically. And since those celebrations have been canceled, we're going to ask Dr. Campbell maybe if we can get Emily Goonan to distribute that video on our social media. It's a really cute, and some of the people are called out by name, which is really neat. And it's important that those people get to see the video. Also, what we'd like to do is maybe come up with some kind of video on our own that we can work with EdTV on to send over to them. So that's my update.
Anybody else have anything that they really want to share and can't wait till next week? Perfect. All right. Next, we have PYDC report. Did you go? I think I read your name, right, Mr. Pisano?
Yep, I did. So that was my first meeting. So there was a meeting on February 12th. There really wasn't a lot of, I would say, major discussion. It was every represented group kind of gave their update of where things are. So it was for myself being the first meeting, it was very informative because it would give me a good overview of what all the PYDC covers in overseas. So I can't say that I have anything major to update everyone. The minutes are uploaded. You can see it was a pretty lengthy meeting. But like I said, it was really just a a touch point for all the various groups that are represented
Louis,
within the PYDC.
Wonderful.
Louis,
Thank
they're
you.
gonna, I've been doing it for ages before, and I just wanted to tell you that they send to every school committee member anyway, the whole agenda that happened that day.
Yeah.
So everybody will get to read it, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's what it is, yeah, so you have it, so
You
take a
can
look at
pick
it.
out highlights
But
later
as,
for what you wanna do.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm sure, and I'll get more personally involved as
Yeah,
time goes on.
It's just very difficult to,
Yeah.
because they go on and on and on like they brush their teeth with gunpowder, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely a very broad
And they
organization.
really, I mean, it's a lot of information. They
No,
just
it is
have
a
to do
lot.
it all
Yeah.
fast because you only have an hour and a half.
Time for your building committee.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of great work, so.
They are.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mrs. Burgess.
Okay. The building committee met, he was there too, February 11th, and there's nothing from the schools on it anyway, much. There's a little bit this time because of the Springtown meeting action. So something came up about the schools, and it was that they approved, when I went to Capital Outlay, we approved Federal, Furnace, Indian Brook, and West L to have roofs. And the MSBA has accepted our projects, so they're gonna pay us 50.58%, so that's not a bad deal. And I guess Gale Associates is the architect that's given an estimated price. And so on town meeting also, there's articles going through on the central fire station. The 3 fire stations renovation project for West Bourne and Manamet, Bourne Road and Manamet. And they're all under contract and they're just starting to really get going. They've done some on West already, but other than that, no. North Plymouth, Maritime, just final invoices mostly.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's it.
Mr. Morgan, do you have
Unless
anything
you
to
have
add?
something that I can.
Not much, other than, they're actually pulling the town article on the school. It says, Mr. Brothers, Brad.
You're
Brad,
right.
sorry.
Yep, you're right. Got it.
Said because, the MSBA is supportive of the project, they felt that Gail's estimate is way low. So I think we're gonna come back in the fall, I think.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, so they're not gonna do it
Yes,
now.
thank you. So it should not affect the timeline of the project. The MSBA it anticipates that estimate should be higher than it was received. So, but we'll go through with the design and the OPM part of that, which will be at the town meeting, and then continue that. We don't anticipate that project would happen for a year anyway, so it really shouldn't delay that. And it may benefit us because the costs of materials is quite high right now. So it might be advantageous to the town ultimately anyways.
Wonderful. Any old business?
You got it.
Nope. Any new business? Miss Savory?
Sorry, guys, I'll do this really quickly. The first thing is, we had a couple of requests, and I think I agree that maybe this is a good idea, is I went through the Massachusetts requirements from the governor with mask wearing, as well as the DESEs. And Massachusetts requires kids over the age of 5, and the DESE suggests that, but we don't have it in our policy that kindergarten and first graders, that we require it. And I would like to propose that we do add that to our policy, especially if we're going to bring all the kids back together. The Massachusetts requirements are students ages 5 and up. So I just would like to make a motion or propose that we could make that part of our policy, especially if we're going to bring kids back closer together. That's the first one. I don't know if it needs to be a motion or if we want to talk about it next week.
So, yeah, I
Dr.
believe
Rogers.
it is in the policy that we're going to discuss next week, the mask wearing, because there is some caveats to that. So if it's okay with the committee, I would suggest we maybe talk about it when we talk about the policy and go over the edits.
Okay, great, thanks. Because I have a copy of the Massachusetts one and the copy of the DESE one. The DESE is more vague, but Massachusetts is pretty clear. And then the other thing is what Dr. Sorensen said earlier is I did start a letter that I'll try to get to Ms. Grimes, maybe with Ms. Badger's help, before the agenda comes out about MCAS. And especially with what MASC is doing around maybe advocating to have the state get some kind of a waiver on that. But those are my two things for new business.
Thank you. Anybody else? That was going to be mine too. So thank you for doing that. All right.
I know we discussed it and I wasn't sure, so I didn't want to step on your
Nope,
toes. I'm sorry.
You are good. All right. We've got approval of consent agenda. Does anybody have anything that needs to be removed from the consent agenda?
Yeah, I need to
Dr.
pull out-
Sorensen.
I need to pull out the minutes of Saturday morning minutes of the 6th.
February 6th. Okay. Anybody else have anything else they need to be pulled out? Okay. So then I need a motion to the remaining consent agenda, right? Yes.
I'll make a motion
Mr. Morgan.
to approve the consent agenda minus the minutes of February 6th.
Perfect. Mrs. Burgess, second. I have a motion and a second. Do I have any comments, questions, concerns, issues? Wonderful. All right, we will take it for a vote. Ms. Savory?
Yeah, I think Ms. Grimes, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Yes, Mrs. Haywood?
Yes.
Mrs. Burgess? Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Paisano?
Yes.
Dr. Sorensen?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so unanimous. All right, minutes of February 6th, Dr. Sorensen?
Yes, and the minutes of February the 6th on the third page and the second paragraph, it reads, Dr. Sorensen inquired about the possibility of utilizing ESSER funds for roof repairs. It was not for roof repairs. It was for repairing the air handling units on the roof of PCIS. And why that's important, because roof repairs would not be covered by ESSA, but air handling units would be covered by ESSA. So that's why that correction's important.
Nope, that's good.
In addition, Mr. Brothers indicated that it is unlikely the funds can be used for roofing. But later on in the same meeting, if you all remember, he read an email he received from our Director of Building and Grounds, which said that the air handling units could be covered under ESSA.
You're right.
So I think that has to be reflected at the end of that same paragraph.
Good call.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any additional edits or? All right, seeing none, do I have a motion?
So
Oh,
with
Mr.
that
Morgan?
change, then
Oh,
we can
Mrs. Burgess?
move it.
Sorry.
We're gonna do the minutes of February.
With the
change.
change, whatever you want to move.
Yeah, I would
Yes.
say I want to move it.
Perfect. Do I have a second?
So you're moving it with corrections.
You moved it with the corrections, correct?
I moved it with the, with the
Corrections from
change,
Dr.
yeah.
Sorensen. Okay, perfect. Sorry, my brain is, it's late. My brain's not working.
Oh,
Susanna will second it. All right, any questions, thoughts, issues? All right, perfect. Ms. Savory? Yes. Mrs. Haywood?
Yes.
Yes. Mrs. Burgess?
Yeah.
Yes. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Paisano?
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Sorensen, yes. I vote yes as well. Perfect. Motion passes, and the meeting is adjourned unless anybody has anything they would like to bring up at 10:41. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks, Miss Michelle.
Thank you. Everyone sleep.